So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Wednesday, June 24th, 2020 Governing Board meeting to order. Mrs. Nye, would you please do our roll call?
Barb Monston.
Here.
Laura Bruner.
Here.
David Evans.
Here.
Lindsay Love.
Here.
And Karen McGee.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, I would love to. Please stand if you'd like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please join me in a moment of silence as we reflect on all the events that have occurred in our country recently? Thank you, Mr. Evans, for leading the pledge for us this evening. Our first order of business tonight is a public hearing on the revised 2019-2020 budget. Mrs. Lana Berry will be doing our presentation for us. Mrs. Berry.
All right. Well, good evening, Madam President, members of the Governing Board. And tonight you're going to see two different budgets, but the first budget that we are going to discuss is the revised budget, your last revised budget for 2019-2020. Now, the reason that it is not by May 15th is because the state allowed us to finalize the budget by June the 30th and to bring it to you. And the reason for that is we have the CARE Act dollars that are part of this budget and on a line item that I will show you in a minute. And then there were some changes that took place and they weren't quite sure how to handle all the ADM related to this year's budget and next year's budget. So we're finalizing those pieces.
The curriculum?
All right. So I'm going to share my screen.
Could you hold,
okay?
Mrs. Berry?
Yes.
Can you hold just a moment? I believe that there are some people who are not muted, and would you please check your microphone because we're getting a lot of extraneous noise. Thank you. Go ahead, Mrs. Berry.
All right, I want to make sure that you can see the document that I have up. Can you see the revised? It'll say revision of 2019-20 M&O.
No, not yet.
Okay, hang on. Well, let's see here. Hang on. For some reason, it is not coming up. So hang on just a minute. I apologize. Why isn't it showing? Well, I am not getting it to share on my Teams meeting, so I apologize. I keep flicking to share the screen, and it is not coming up, so I apologize. And I'm not sure why it's not coming up on the screen like it typically does, so I apologize. But what we can do is I can discuss it, and then I will, if you can, look at the file called Budget Presentation. It starts with the revision of 2019-2020, and it is attached on your hearing. If we can look at that, I will discuss that until I can grab somebody that can. Oh, Eric Craig's coming in to help share it with me. Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's not going. I've got all of them up that way.
It's not allowing you to.
Okay. I'm not sure why. Here is the 3 teams, and then share is right there. But it won't. And it won't pop them up.
It'll only do one at a time. So if this is it.
Mm-mm. No. That's not the one. Yeah, it's this one, right? Right there.
Something happened. Your video went away. There it
Can you
is.
see the document? Can you
Now
see
we
the
can
document?
see it.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. All right, can you see, does it say revision of the 2019-20 maintenance and operations budget limits on the top?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. All right, so this document is actually a summary of the differences between the latest revised budget that you as the board approved in December of 2019 versus the actual expenditure budget with the 80 forms that are attached. And it gives you just a comparison for you to look at. And I'm only going to summarize some of the important parts. There's not much of a big change in maintenance and operations. And if you can look this number right here, the difference is only $136,000 in our maintenance and operations fund. So the only difference was, as we're in current year funding, ADM, there's slight changes to ADM. So we had a slight decrease of $100,000 from our ADM with reflections of actual ADM numbers. A slight also change within our override allocation compared to the revision. We can only allocate as much as we did on the adoption. So a slight change in that. So, and these are very minimal. So a difference of $136,000 on the revenue side. So we had approved $315,294,000. It's now $315,157,000. We compared budget 25 on our our budget 25 on the ADE forms to get that, and we confirm with ADE, so we make sure all of our numbers are accurate. The second page is actually referring to page 1 of the expenditure budget. And these are the line item changes. So there are a number of changes, and there are a couple big areas that I wanted to point out, but really we're just shifting all of those funds throughout every line item within the maintenance and operations, only when the total comes up to $136,000. Now, one of the major areas that you're going to see is a decrease on salary line items in regular education. And the reason you see that is in December, we put our carryover and our extra additional funds in that line item. And then what we do is we clean in the spring and we move the carryover that we put into that extra line item from our annual financial report. And as we clean up line items within our budget. The main areas are line items 10, 22, 65, and 71. Now, the other thing that we did that you can't see in this is that if you were to go into our individual general ledger, you would see that for summer school, we've added expenditures. That's actually in this line item, but there's other chunks where we've taken money out to spend it in other areas where we need to clean up line items. If it's a coding issue, if it's just accurate salary and benefits, once we have all the accurate information from payroll and from HR. So we moved a chunk from lines 2 and 3, and we moved it into a number of areas. For example, even in line item 4, we moved money because we accurately reflect our substitutes and some of our employees that are SEI and Smart School employees. They're no longer in the payroll, but they're actually in purchase services. So we make some of those adjustments. If you come down into student support services, there's just small adjustments. The only area we slightly increased was related to an adjustment for substitutes and healthcare assistants and nurses because they're coded in that area. So we went back through purchase orders and payroll line items and cleaned up things over the last 4 or 5 months just to make sure that our budget is as accurate as possible. Same thing down in instructional support. You can see some small changes, just mostly recording salaries and benefits and purchase services accurately. If we go into general administration, there's only a few other costs that are important. We actually went back over on line 22. We had the election expenses, so we justified all the amounts that we spent, and with the voter information we have to send out for our voter pamphlets, we have to capture that expense, and there was actually more of an expense than we had projected originally. And then for the selling of our bonds for our rating agencies, all of those expenditures are within that line item. So we updated that line item by $500,000. The other areas that we've changed are just a couple small other areas where we have coding issues, where we've changed from one area, for example, like on line 28, and we move it down into line 40 down here. So there's just small changes related to coding issues or accurate projections of maybe it's a central office expense versus out at a school expense, and so we have to change a function code throughout the documents. On the next page, there's not too many other significant changes. There is one small one down in special education. We needed to code purchase services. We actually looked back at our AFR last year and some of our codings between purchase services and some of our salary line items within special education, and we had to increase because of the purchase orders and the amount we've actually spent in the last 2 years. We upped that amount to accurately reflect that expenditure in that line item. The other area that we updated was in our speech pathology area on line 71. Sorry. We also increased that by approximately $1 million to actually reflect what had been spent over the last couple of years in that line item versus up. It was actually in the past had been in salaries and benefits throughout a few of the line items, and we moved that to accurately reflect that expenditure in purchase services because of all the purchase orders that are specifically coded to that line item. And then the last area, there's just a couple small changes that you can see just to accurately reflect budgets that we might not have had a small budget in. You can see the small areas in instructional support staff. There's a few that we just didn't have line items, and we wanted to make sure that we have a budget in those areas because we were spending a small amount. Then you can see the total at the very bottom. This is our expenditure budget, $315,294,000, and it matched with the revised budget that we presented to you in December. And then there's $315,157,000 is the new revised budget as of tonight. The difference is $136,000. So it matches the revenue piece. Revenues have to match the expenditure side. So again, it's just moving to more accurately reflect the line item expenditures within the budget. So that's the maintenance and operations fund. The next page is the capital fund. And ultimately, we had approved $20,460,000. And now this has slightly gone down to $20,086,000. So this is the revenue side of it. There was school finance 915 adjustment, just a slight adjustment for ADM for $23,000. And then the actual 396 is related to ADE's adjustments to our calculation on the DAW reduction. We don't come up with that. It's actually based on the number of ADM across the state. And then ADE gives us our reduction based on our ADM. And so ultimately they revise those numbers and then send that back out to us, and that's the adjustment. It was more ultimately of a reduction than what we originally had in the latest revised budget. Now on the expenditure side, which is captured, you're going to see we just made the slight adjustment because of that amount to our textbook line item. So if you're to go in there, you're going to see that what we did was made an adjustment to our textbook line item and instructional aids area because we have some of our contingency for capital within that line item. And then we just made a small, also another entry related to some of, when we went back and looked at purchase orders and account codes, we had changed some things within property of the library books just to reflect actual coding pieces. So not much of a change. But again, expenditures need to match the revenue, and we updated the difference of the district additional assistance, which is called DAW, reduction that the state gives us. The other area that's important within your budget, you're going to see on pages 5, 6, and 6 within your packet, is that we have our bond. We updated our bond information. We had $49 million, and we updated it to $60 million that we had projected to spend throughout the fiscal year 19-20. As we finished projects and updated things throughout the rest of this last fiscal year, we were able to expedite some of our projects. So we updated those expenditures, and we just made sure that we had a line item specifically for all the items that we've had within our budget from the 2015 bond and 2019 bond that we were projecting to spend based on projects that we had allotted for. Also, new school facilities, we just updated specifically just a little bit more because there was an allocation from our land and the school facilities board, so we just updated the dollar amount slightly. Adjacent ways, we actually took down slightly because our cash and principal within our adjacent ways fund wasn't $1,688,000, it was $1,411,000. So we just wanted to make sure we accurately reflected the costs of that. And then the last one is we actually put in all of our building renewal grants. Frank Fletcher has applied for a number of building renewal grants. We were awarded $3,042,000 worth, and so we wanted to make sure we inputted that in for all the building renewal grants that we were approved for. The last sheet that's important reflects our federal funds and our state funds, and then all of our cash funds. And really, I'm only going to draw your attention to 3 different areas. This one is the CARES Act allocation. You can see it was $3,274,352. So that will be, it's actually on a specific federal fund, but we wanted to make sure we put the information in there. The other areas, the other grants, you're going to see increases and decreases are related to the budgets, their carryovers, and between our federal programs director and our special education director, we update all of our grants. So we just updated them to make sure they reflect what ADE has. The only 2 other areas are that we received our allocation for the college credit exam incentives called CCIEP, and there is an increase that was, we had received an additional amount for all of those exams. Plus, we had our results-based funding update in the budget revision. So we actually put the allocations and the increases in there based on the information that we received throughout the year. We received most of that information after the latest revision. So those were our biggest changes to our federal programs and state funds. We did not have any changes since the last revision on our cash funds, our intergovernmental agreements, our student activity funds, and our all of those, what I call enterprise funds. We had updated those in December, and we did not make any changes to those at this point. The last sheet is just some descriptions for you if you would like to go back and look at some of the wording that we put on the line items. But that is actually the revision for the last revision for fiscal year 1920. It's really to make sure that we match the Arizona Department of Education related to our budget, the actual revenues that we will receive, and then trying to make sure that all of our line items are accurately reflecting expenditures. And it also helps us prepare for the 2020-21 budget so that we're accurately reporting each of our expenditure lines by code and by department and program. Is there any questions that you have for me?
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. I do have one question, and that is now, we typically will do something in October, I believe. Is that actually our AFR?
Yes, great question, Madam President. So how the budget cycle works is there is a proposed budget that typically is at the end of June, first part of July, and then 10 days later, we are required by law to adopt the budget. Then in October, we are doing an annual financial report for the prior year. Then in December, we're doing a revision on the current year budget. And usually by May 15th, we're doing the latest revised budget. The only reason this revised budget is different is because we did not receive our allocation for the CARES Act until almost the end of May, which was past the deadline of May 15th. And so some of those adjustments were being made, and they allowed us to postpone the last revision of our budget. But the AFR is due by October 15th, and that captures all of the expenditures related to this budget that you're speaking about right now. So in October, for us, usually it's September because it's before fall break, we're bringing back to the board how we spent all the budget that we ask you to approve.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from the board members?
Madam President, this is Dave Evans.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Mrs. Berry, I hate to do this to you, but can you give us a short explanation of what the CARES Act is and why we're getting almost $3.3 million?
Sure. So the stimulus money comes from the federal government and through our state department, the Arizona Department of Education, and it aligns with Title I. So how we receive money is based on our Title I allocation. Our percentage of money that we receive in the entire state based on the Title I allocation to our state is the same method that they used for the CARES Act funds. So they received CARES Act funds at the state level and they distributed it the same way they do with our Title I. So we received $3.2 million. Mesa Unified School District received about $17 million. And the reason they received a lot larger amount than we did is because first, they're a larger school district. They're the only school district larger than us. But the second reason is they have a lot higher free and reduced lunch, so their Title I budget is much larger than ours. So it's based on the percentage that we receive for Title I compared to the entire state, and then that same formula was used when distributing the CARES Act funds.
Thank you. And so those dollars, that nearly $3 million, is slightly somewhat restricted.
It actually, there is some restrictions, but I feel like we're able to use it where the district definitely needs that. We've decided to use that on technology. But definitely there's some flexibility within the CARE Act funds. You could use it on multiple things, instruction, technology. You could actually use it on daycare that helped with childcare. You could use it on food service. There's a number of things related that if your district had the expenditures, you could use it on. So it's very flexible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions from the board? Okay, if not, thank you, Mrs. Berry. I appreciate you giving us the update. Oh, yes. Who, Mrs. Brunner?
Thank you. I just checked in. There's an echo too, so someone can put themselves on mute. That'd be great. So for the CARES Act for next year, do we have any predictions about what that could possibly look like, or have you heard anything from the state on, I know the governor just came out about an hour before our study session with some funds. Can you just tell us any information you have on that and what that might look like for the next school year?
Absolutely. Great question, Mrs. Brunner. All right. So a couple different things. The CARE Act money is actually for 18 months. It can be retroed all the way back to March the 13th, and then it goes all the way through this next fiscal year. So it's for fiscal year since COVID started, fiscal year 1920, and then it goes all the way through. That $3.2 million has to last us all the way through the end of this next fiscal year. So there's no new allocation besides that $3.2 million. Now, the governor did come out, and he has a couple different pots of money that he has allocated that comes from the CARE Acts overall. He's calling two different things: the Enrollment Stability Grant Program, and he's also calling the funds the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds. And what he's doing with the CARE Act money is he's doing two different things. One is he's trying to utilize that money to help us stabilize our ADM. And because we're funded based on our ADM, he's wanting to make sure that districts don't drop drastically and then can't provide the same services that they have provided in the future. I think one thing is people get confused thinking that there's going to be extra money on top of that to go spend on services, but really it's just mostly to stabilize our ADM. There will be two opportunities. If you drop more than 2% of your ADM, you will be held harmless, or you can choose a different option through the grant process, and you can claim all students as a 1.0 ADM for students who are either online or in brick and mortar, and you won't lose that 0.5 funding. You can take the higher of the two. We'll know by October which one is the most beneficial. For us, I believe it'll be option number 2 because we're a growing district. So therefore, I think that it's going to be helpful for us to claim all students, no matter if they're brick and mortar or if they've chosen our online system, to be claimed as 1.0 so we don't lose that ADM, and hopefully we still capture our growth. Those funds don't come to us, though, in our base support level. They actually come to us in a grant system. So there's a little bit of accounting that we'll have to do, and that's what my job and my staff's job is to do, is to account for all of that, because there's a reimbursement method and there's some accounting pieces. We call it kind of clunky, but it's a system. So there's not necessarily additional money on top of the $3.2 million. What he's using that money for, and the majority of the chunk of money, is to hold districts harmless and to be able to stabilize our ADM across the state. So that's where almost all of his money goes. He does have a small amount, about $70 million, that's going to go into digital, bridging the digital divide. He's putting $40 million specifically into rural Arizona, trying to give kids access to the internet in different places, and he's pairing up with a number of partners to help with that. He's got $20 million for accelerating different academies, teacher academies, school innovation for $1 million. There's some other small amounts, and we'll have to find out what we're eligible for and what we're not to apply for those specific. And those are those emergency education funding. But I think sometimes there's a confusion that there's this extra money on top of that, and really he's using that money to stabilize, because that's what he heard from everyone, is we have to stabilize our ADM just to keep the services that we have. And that's a huge concern for all of us. We need at least the budget that we had before. And in some districts that are really declining, it might help them because they're only going to be, they might have declined by 5%. Now they'll only have to take a hit by about 2%. So that should really help. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if we wanted to reduce class size, that would have to come out of our reserves, basically. There's not extra money really for that.
Absolutely. There's no additional funding for that. You are accurate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the board members? Okay. We will move on to some of our routine business. Mrs. Berry, would you be able to remove the shared document from the screen?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm definitely still getting an echo from somewhere. I'm not sure where it's coming from. But we will now go to our routine business. We need to approve the minutes of our June 10th, 2020 regular board meeting. I have not gotten any information that there have been any additions or corrections to those minutes. So could I please get a motion from one of the board members?
Madam President, this is Lindsay, and I make a motion to approve the minutes of the June 10th, 2020 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Dave Evans, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the June 10th, 2020 regular board meeting, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Next is to approve our payroll for June 4th and June 18th, 2020, and our current expenditures. Could I get a motion, please?
Madam President, this is Dave Evans. I move that we approve payroll for June 4th and June 18th, 2020, and current expenditures.
This is Lindsay. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving payroll for June 4th, June 18th, and the current expenditures, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Dr. Castile, do you have any correspondence for us?
None this evening, Madam President.
Then could you please do our consent agenda?
Yes, our very lengthy consent agenda. Much of this is routine on an annual basis. We have an out-of-state student travel pre-planning request from Arizona College Prep Erie School. The final trip is really approved on a case-by-case basis and will be a contingent upon the current health or the current health situation at the time. Monetary gifts generously donated to the Chandler School District, $63,992.46. We have donations of a few items that was donated to the district in the amount of $1,330.95. We're requesting approval of the resolution for the district to designate banking account custodians, signatories, and student activity fund treasurer and assistant treasurer. We need to remove Sandy Cooper and add Wendy Nance as their positions have changed for the revolving fund account and payroll tax account. We have the approval of the resolution to appoint an authorized representative to the Arizona Risk Retention Trust. We are recommending Lana Berry be that individual. We also need to have a resolution to appoint a district authorized representative to the Arizona School Alliance. That's our workers' comp organization, and we're recommending that I be authorized to represent the district in all matters. Approve the resolution for designation of a district agent to the Arizona Department of Emergency and Military Affairs, and we are recommending Lana Berry, Chief Financial Officer, to act in that role. We have the contract renewal with our wonderful Chandler Education Foundation, Inc. This is just a renewal of our current contract. There are no significant changes. 2020-21 secondary course, CTE, and extracurricular fee schedule. You'll see, I know you recognize the need for student fees in some of our courses that are not financed by local, state, or federal funds. It's important to note that no student is denied an education as a result of the inability to pay these supplementary charges. CTE and secondary course activity changes are highlighted in red, have minimally increased an average of $3 to $25 from the previous board-approved fee schedule. The extracurricular activity fee is also attached, and there are no changes to the fee schedule for that area. Pursuant to ARS 15843, you must annually appoint hearing officers for suspension hearings, and we are recommending to appoint Fred Coates and Terry Williams as the district disciplinary hearing officers for 2020-21. We are asking for approval for the Vista Higher Learning Spanish resources that are used by our 6th grade dual language immersion teachers at CTA Liberty. It's in support of our Spanish instruction. The resources are also used at Bogle Junior High and ACP Oakland as students transition into the junior high who are fluent in Spanish speaking. Funding and training materials would be provided through our textbook budget. We estimate the cost of this purchase to be $17,065. It has met all the requirements for posting and making available to our public. All our curricula is aligned to the Arizona state standards in order to meet the diverse needs of students. The primary and supplementary curricula list for all grades and subjects is being presented for your approval. This has been used in prior years or has been approved by the board through a request for information, a RFP process. We act on an annual basis, bring this comprehensive list for the board's approval. As you know, we have quite a warehouse where we stock items. With a district our size, that allows us to be more efficient and garner better prices. At this time, we are putting in general supplies and stocking with various art, equipment, furniture, health and training supplies, and you can see the list for yourself. We are recommending approval to expend up to $681,794.49 for the fiscal year 2020 and 21 through 2021. This makes all these supplies available to our sites to order when they need them. Requesting approval for the RFP for professional development services. You can see there are 46 vendors that we call upon for various training throughout the year. We anticipate spending up to $500,000. These funds many times come from our soft money or grants, but there are over 46 vendors that went through a request for proposal process. And approval to use our, this is the company that provides us our substitutes, approval to continue with the employee staffing agreement we have with ESI. Human resources, employment, separation, and compensation is the final item under consent, and we're recommending approval as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Castile. I would just like to make one on number 611. The amount you had said $17,065. It should be $17,000.65.
Thank you, Madam President.
I would like to make that correction. Could I please get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
Madam President, this is Karen, and I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
This is Laura, and I second. And I have a quick question.
Okay.
Just regarding the CTE course fees, Dr. Castillo, could you just mention what the opportunities are for students who might not be able to pay those regarding scholarships?
Yes, we work through the administrative office, and we have an assistant principal every site that is in charge of the CTE program, and families just have to let us know that they need some support, and it's processed at that level.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All those in favor then of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And Madam President, this is Dave. I just had a question on 614 for professional development, maybe for Dr. Nance.
Dr. Nance, I don't think is here at the moment.
Okay. Can
She was called away on a family issue.
Oh, okay. I wanted to vote yes, but I just had a quick question, and maybe somebody else can answer this on a couple of, and I did the same thing for the different providers for different things last meeting as well. But it seemed like there were some organizations that were omitted from the professional development. And can I just list a few, and maybe you can clarify for me? Northern Arizona University does a lot of our professional development, from my understanding. National Education Association, U of A, basically all of the universities. And then ASCD, the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development. And then the other one that was the bigger one was Marzano. I thought we were still using Marzano and paid them a lot of money. So I thought they would be included in this.
Dr. Gilbert, Mr. Narducci, or any of you, can you help me with that? I know we do have a relationship. I think we have a separate contract with some of those organizations. Mr. Evans, we have a separate organization, agreement with Marzano that stands on its own. I would have to check on the others for you.
Yeah, and I guess the universities would be the other ones, since we really have articulation with them.
Sure.
That helps them, yeah.
So that with our memberships, as well as with our purchase services, staff development are available through those agencies as well as with our agreements with universities.
We'll follow up and give you a real clear answer as soon as we can, but I know we have other agreements with those organizations as well.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, would you let Donna, would you record your vote for Donna and I, please?
With the anticipation of that information, yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry to put you on the spot, but all right. So we have some action items this evening, and our first one is going to go to Mrs. Berry, and we are going to consider, and if deemed advisable, adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of tax anticipation notes on behalf of the district. Mrs. Berry.
Madam President, members of the governing board, I also have on the virtual meeting is Bill Davis, and he is our advisor related to TAN, so he can also speak if we have any questions. He's our expert in this area and will be able to answer some additional questions. But tonight, the tax anticipation notes that you're approving are used to cover operating deficits created by uneven property tax collections and state aid receipts. And as you know, it takes us a while to get all of our state aid payments, and we are delayed at a certain period of time for state aid payments. Also, property taxes are collected a couple times a year where we actually receive the big chunks, even though we start payroll right off the bat with 12-month employees, obviously 11-month, 10-month, and then 9-month employees. So those expenses start up soon. So during the first half of each fiscal year, the district incurs expenses, including payroll and insurance trust payments, which can exceed available revenues. When this occurs, the district experiences temporary operating or cash flow deficits. Tax anticipation notes are used to cover these deficits until sufficient property tax and state aid revenues is received by the district. The fiscal impact to the district is dependent upon the amount of tax anticipation notes issued and the interest rate at time of issuance. Therefore, it is recommended that the board adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of tax anticipation notes in the amount not to exceed $50 million. So there's 4 documents that are attached for you. There is the resolution, which is the important piece that you're authorizing us to sell the tax anticipation notes. This year it's a little different than in the past. We are selling to the county treasurer because it has a lower ultimately interest rate. We're about 1% versus the basis point out on the private market is a little bit higher. Basis points of about 0.25, a little bit higher, so at about 1.25. So we think we can save money by going through the county treasurer this year. So there's a resolution authorizing you to allow Dr. Castile or myself to ultimately purchase and use the purchase agreement to do this transaction. There's a certification of an agenda item once you get done with your vote that we have to use for the legal side of that. And then there's the intergovernment agreement that's attached for you to see and view that's related to us partnering with the county treasurer on this. Now, the one good thing I wanted to remind you of is that we are allowed any interest that we have on these tax anticipation notes or warrants. You can see we can add that on line 7 of your budget. So it is something that the state has allowed us to increase our budget with, is the actual cost of those, because they know ultimately that there could be a cost to districts for having a cash deficit due to state aid payments being delayed. So that part doesn't come out of our regular budget, can be increased in our budget capacity. So just a reminder of that piece. But I have Bill Davis here to answer any questions that you might have related to truth and taxation, and tax anticipation notes.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Mr. Evans, it looks like you have a question.
Oh, I was going to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay, I move that the governing board adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of tax anticipation notes in an amount not to exceed $50 million.
This is Karen, and I'll second.
Go ahead, Laura.
I second.
Thank you. So we can start some discussion. Mr. Evans, do you have any questions?
Well, thanks both for being here, and probably a little easier to be here these days, so thank you. I'm going to ask the same question I guess I ask every year, or every couple of years when we need to do this. Why doesn't the state just make this a standard practice without us having to go to resolution every year? I mean, I understand some districts need to do this based on their size.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. It's a very good question. I don't have a good answer for it. Unfortunately, I think, the state, with the state rollover specifically, is attempting to manage their budget and manage their cash flows. And, unfortunately, that falls down onto your shoulders as a district. So it's a very good question. It should be done a different way, but they're not.
And I guess it's just, when you're a smaller district, maybe you don't need the help, you don't need this. But at the same time, when you're the superintendent driving the bus and cleaning the floors at night, you're going to have to get around to this. You do need it for your district.
That's right. No, it's a challenge. It's very challenging. I wish I had a better answer for you. I'm sorry.
I think the other thing to just answer.
You get a place. That's the important thing.
And Mr. Evans, members of the board, I also think that there is a request. We're required to do an advance for state aid, which we do every single year. It's a requirement by statute. So we do request an advance of state aid because to be eligible for TANs, you also have to do that to claim then the interest piece of it. So we follow all the guidelines on that. And a lot of districts run in their line of credit. They utilize a high line of credit with the county on a regular basis. Sometimes it's more advantageous for us to use the tax anticipation notes on the financial side. We can take advantage of some of the laws related to that to make sure that we're maximizing dollars for our school district. So we're just making sure that we follow each of the requirements that the statute allows us to use with that. And also we make sure we always apply for that early advanced state aid
Sure.
that hopefully, and sometimes the state will give it to us and sometimes they won't.
Right. It seems cumbersome.
It is.
I didn't know that sometimes they don't allow it. So.
Yeah, no, and it's a very good question. And, part of it, too, isn't really the state's fault because, a large portion of the district's budget is funded with property taxes, and the property tax system in and of itself creates the imbalance of revenues versus expenses. So that's another component part of it. For those districts that rely heavily on property tax, it's just not a smooth cash flow stream.
So an additional question, especially concerning the uneven cash flow, with our current financial issues in the state, with so many people out of work, and I'm sure that taxes oftentimes are not first things that are going to get paid for them. Do we anticipate needing more funding than the $50 million due to those type issues?
Madam President, members of the board, that's, again, a very good question. At this point in time, it's a little premature to say for sure. I think it's possible that that if, COVID continues to get worse or be a very big problem, the first property tax installment, which is due November 1st, there may be a number of delinquent payments or slow payments that could impact, revenues of the district received by the county. I think it's a little, in our planning, we're assuming the typical tax collections, which have been in the 95 to 99% range. If that occurs, we should be in good shape. I think it's it'd be a little bit, let me say it this way. I think we try to be very conservative with our borrowing, and it would be a little bit too aggressive, I think, to make some assumptions that delinquent property taxes would be at a level where we would need to borrow more. Now, next year when we're having this discussion, you'll know whether or not, that was a good forecast, but I think it's better and more conservative to not be too aggressive at this point in time when there's so much unknowns and so much uncertainty out there.
Now, we don't purchase the $50 million all at once, do we? Or is it done on more of an as-needed basis?
Again, Madam President, members of the board, another very good question. So ultimately what happens is that the district will issue notes, and the county treasurer will be the investor or purchaser of those notes. And what the treasurer will do let's just say, for example, if we issue the full 50, that $50 million will be deposited into the district's account at the treasurer's office. It's Fund 645. Those dollars will be invested by the county treasurer until you use them. And that could be in the form of a trust fund payment for your health insurance. And those dollars are drawn out of that Fund 645 only when the balances in your M&O fund, your classroom site fund, and your unrestricted capital fund get down to zero. And that's when they start drawing on that Fund 645. And they use it very much like a line of credit, but the dollars are just transferred over to your M&O account over time.
Great, thank you. And is there any way that, I know, as I say, going back to the mortgage thing and the tax payments and all, I know that there have been people who have asked for deferments for some of their mortgage payments. Mm-hmm. And I assume those mortgage payments also include their escrow account, which then pays the property taxes that are due on their home. Do we have any idea as to how many of those type deferrals have been initiated in our district?
Madam President, members of the board, we do not. And okay. I have not heard from the county treasurer's office with regards to that either, or any data. I know that the county treasurer last March, April, did attempt to postpone that last property tax installment payment from May 1st to, either to the end of June or the end of July. That did not occur. So, theoretically, those payments were made, or if they weren't made, they became delinquent on May 1st. We get through this next cycle, and again, it appears, based on the numbers that we're seeing at the county treasurer's website, that most of those property tax payments were made on May 1st.
Great, thank you. Do any of our board members have any other questions? Ms. Love or Mrs. Bruner, Mrs. McGee?
I do, and it was a question that came in to me from a community member, and I could have Googled it, but I probably would have botched the whole explanation, so I figured I'd ask it here. They're wanting to know what the difference is between tax anticipation notes and bonds.
Very good question, Madam President, members of the board. Both tax anticipation notes and bonds are a form of fixed income securities. The primary difference is that the tax anticipation note has a 1-year maturity or less, whereas bonds typically have a 1 to potentially 20, 30-year maturity. That's distinction number one. The second one is that, as you all know, your bonds are paid for, secured by and paid for taxes from your secondary property tax. So there's a specific levy for bonds and your override out of your secondary tax rate. Tax anticipation notes are secured by and paid for tax receipts, which include state aid and property tax, primary property taxes from your M&O fund. So it's maturity and actual security pledge, the revenues that are pledged to secure the instruments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think someone else had a question also. Was that you, Mrs.
This is Karen.
Oh, Karen. Okay, great.
Yeah. This is Mrs. McGee. Mrs. Berry, I was wondering if we have a line of credit.
We do have a line of credit, Mrs. McGee. We have a line with the county, with the treasurer's office, and we can access that at the end of the fiscal year when TANs are due. They're due by the end before June 30th. And so then we have to use the line of credit at that point until we get our state aid payments that are postponed, that are for the fiscal year. We actually receive them in July. And so we have to use that, but we don't typically use it till the very end of the year.
But we have no line of credit with the bank or financial institution.
Just through the county treasurer's office, yes. Which is through a bank. Yes.
All right. If Mrs. Bruner, did you have any questions?
No, I did not.
Okay. Then we will go ahead and I will call for a vote on this. All those in favor?
I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Evans.
Since Mr. Davis is still on the phone, can you or Mrs. Berry explain why we only have a line of credit with the treasurer's office? Because it's probably good for people to understand that.
Lana, would you like me to?
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Madam President, members of the board, Board Member Evans, the county treasurer by statute serves as ex officio treasurer for each and every school district in the county. And what the county treasurer does is they have a servicing bank contract currently with JP Morgan Chase. And through that servicing bank contract, they establish lines of credit for each district.
Right.
So technically the line of credit does go through the county, but it's JP Morgan Chase that's providing that line of credit if it's ever used.
Right. And then from an investment standpoint, they can be very careful about what they can do to garner a little bit of interest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One other
policy statement and all that kind of stuff in place.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And one of the other points that's probably worth just understanding, and one of the advantages of utilizing the tax anticipation notes to address your cash flow deficits, is that line of credit is priced off as a percentage of prime, and it's typically around 65% of prime, which puts it in the 2.5% range today, 2.25% to 2.5%. As Mrs. Berry mentioned earlier, we're estimating that if we were to sell the tax anticipation notes today, the district's all-in cost would be at or maybe just under 1%. So there's significant savings, cost savings to the district and district taxpayers.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mrs. Berry, have we repaid our tax anticipation notes from last year or from the current year?
Yes.
Yes, we have. Okay. Just curious. All right. Then if there's no other questions from board members, I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of adopting a resolution authorizing the sale of tax anticipation notes on behalf of the district, please say aye.
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 And I believe that this particular one requires an itemized list of people who voted. So I'm hearing all yeses from all voting members. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. I just wanted to make sure so that Mrs. Nye didn't have to come back and ask us more details. So thank you very much, Mr. Davis, for coming and joining us this evening and helping answer some of the questions. We appreciate you being with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Good evening.
Good evening. Let's see. Our next is, again, for Mrs. Berry, and this is the district, school district annual expenditure budget revision again. We had a public hearing earlier this evening on it, and I believe this is for us to, I guess, just adopt this. Mrs. Berry.
Madam President, members of the board, in accordance with Arizona statute ARS 15-905 and 15-910, by June 30th, the board may revise the school district annual expenditure budget after notice has been given and a public meeting has been held. The revision reflects the adjustments for average daily membership, operating and capital budget line item changes to account for actual and encumbered expenses, reflections of new revenues and expenditures in direct relation to COVID-19, and the addition of budget expenditures for construction and opening of new schools. Attached is a district annual budget expenditure, budget revision number 2, and an explanation of the predominant reasons for the adjustments. And that's what we reviewed during the public meeting. So recommendations to adopt the 2019-2020 district annual expenditure budget revision number 2.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Could I get a motion from a board member to adopt this budget?
Madam President, this is Lindsay, and I make a motion to adopt the 2019-2020 District Annual Expenditure Budget Revision number 2.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Does the board have any questions for Mrs. Berry? If there are no questions, then we will go ahead and vote on this action item. All those in favor to approve the adoption of the 2019-2020 District Annual Expenditure Budget Revision number 2, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Mrs. Berry, you also have another item tonight, which is the proposed budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. And I know that you and your department have been extremely busy with all of these financials over the last few weeks. So in advance of you even saying anything, I want to thank you and your department for all the hard work that it has taken to put all this together.
Well, thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Tonight, you're seeing for the first time the proposed budget for 2020-2021. And before I begin, I just want to make sure that you understand this is the first time you'll see the 2021 budget, but there will actually be a hearing on July 15th where the public up to the day before can send in their comments and their information. And we will be able to go over a presentation on it. We'll go over the differences between the revised budget and this new adopted budget for the next fiscal year. And we'll also be able to answer questions that the public has. Since we can't have a in-person meeting, we'll be able to have a virtual meeting, and they will be able to email us specific questions that then I will read and communicate if they do have any questions at that point. So tonight, pursuant to ARS, school districts must publish a public hearing notice and summary of the proposed budget on a district-wide basis for fiscal year 2021. Prior to the publication, the governing board must approve the legal proposed budget. The publication will indicate that on July 15th, there will be a public hearing on the 2020-2021 budget. So a couple things that are important to know within that budget I've actually outlined, and I want to go over that with each of you. So I'm going to share my screen with you again, and I promise I'll find it quicker this time, or I hope I do. All right, so if you can see the board presentation of fiscal year 20 proposed budget. Now, you'll have also received the details of the actual Arizona Department of Education expenditure proposed budget. But this is just a quick summary. And without going into lots of details, because we will actually have a hearing and we'll go over all of the items within it, I just wanted to give you a quick summary. So as you're going through the document and you know what's being posted on the Arizona Department of Education website and on our website, you'll know some of the changes. If you can see right off the bat, the cover sheet's got three main areas that are important. We're going to slightly go over the tax rate. At the next board meeting, we'll talk about it. It'll be a slight decrease, and we'll go over why that is between the primary and the secondary tax and our adjacent ways. So we'll talk about that in detail in both the hearing and in the Truth in Taxation hearing. Our aggregated budget expenditure is going up. As you can see, it went up from $355 million to $378 million. And we're going to go over those reasons. I've got most of those outlined, kind of where it says important financial changes. A lot of those are within there. I only put major ones. We'll go over some additional things. And also, one of the important things is we do an estimate of what the average teacher salary increase will go up to. We did have a 5% increase on average. So you are going to see that on that cover sheet. Now, again, every time we revise, we have to change it once we have all the teachers hired and the percentages calculated, but we do an estimate right off the bat for that. Actually, if you were to look at page 7 and 8, the details for that, all of the increases are part of page 7 and 8 within the budget, but there's a number of things that we've been discussing, including inflation. We had projected 100 student growth. There is money now for summer school. All of our summer school calculations for ADM is included in the 21 budget, not actually in the 20 budget. We have an increase in our teacher experience index. We also have a slight increase in transportation revenue control. We have an addition to our override as we have grown in the past. It's based on last year's ADM. We have a decrease in how much we're paying in registered warrants related to the tax anticipation notes and that we just discussed and our registered warrants. Additional money for Prop 123. This is the year that we get $75 million as a state versus $50 million. So we each got an additional portion. The governor is restoring district additional assistance. We got one additional year of that. And then also a portion of Prop 301 is picking up part of that 5% raise that the governor gave us. He gave us a 5% raise for teachers. 3.6% of it goes into the M&O pot. The other portion comes from Prop 301 to make up that total 5% increase. Pages 1 through 4 are just actual expenditure line items. And what we did was we took the revision that you approved earlier tonight, and we added the new program 5,000s. All the requests that we had from the budget that were approved so far are added in. We also looked at just expenditure items and made sure we had reconciled, and most of that was done in the revision. So everything is up to speed as possible. Page 5 has some new changes on it. It's our building bond fund as we finish our 2 new schools and as we finish our new gifted academy. All of those expenditures for new construction, renovation, and technology are included in our 2019 bond and the finishing of our 2015 bond expenditures. We also have a portion for new school construction that we get from the School Facilities Board. So we'll receive a portion of our payment actually for the first phase of the new high school, and then for the second phase of the high school. Altogether, that's about $17 million. And then we are going to have a new budget for adjacent ways of about $5.4 million, with a new portion being around $4 million. As you saw from the latest revision, we had $1.4 million already in there. That will go towards the elementary school, and then $4 million will go specifically to the new high school. Now, I've also attached the Truth in Taxation hearing notice. We will be printing that in the newspaper. It's required by law to print it 10 days prior to the hearing. We also will post everything on the Arizona Department of Education website and on our website. So there will be a new tax. It's equivalent to about $12 per $100,000 home. So if you had a home that's worth $100,000, the tax would be approximately $12. If you had a $300,000 home, the tax would be approximately $36. So there's a publication for you to see, and I will go over those details when we go through the hearing notice. Mr. Fletcher has also already taken both requests to the School Facilities Board for their approval and has received approval by the School Facilities Board. Page 6 is including information related to the federal programs. You will see the CARE Act money listed for approximately $3.2 million. We have not received money yet for, it's called DEMA, and it's the Department of Emergency Management. And ultimately, that's where we've already been approved and gone through all the layers of training, approval processes. Now what we're doing is collecting all of our expenditures for COVID, and we send that in for a reimbursement. And then ultimately, we will get reimbursed for hand sanitizer, specific PPE equipment, different pieces that we can apply for that they will approve. And we don't know, but we're hoping that we get a significant chunk to reimburse us for a lot of those expenditures that have taken place, not only since March, but into next year. Once we receive that amount, we'll plug that number in. State programs, we have not got our new allocation for the college credit by examination, so you're only going to see the carryover in that line item. We are waiting. I talked to Amber today about that, and we will not know those answers since the AP exams weren't done until July, so we won't have that number until next year. So once we revise the budget, you will see new numbers besides our carryover in that area. Results-based funding, we know that we are going to be receiving results-based funding again this upcoming year. We only have our carryover that's in that budget right now, so we have to wait on that allocation from the Arizona Department of Education. So we're waiting on that allocation. So you probably will not see that until we revise the budget in December. Fund 020 is our instructional improvement fund. And I think President Mazden had asked me some questions, which was really good for me to go research related to the instructional improvement fund. And it was really interesting to watch and see the history of it. Chuck Essex kind of took me back to the gaming. You can go on to the Gaming Commission and look at the history. And what it found was our gaming funds have been pretty consistent, even through the Great Recession and different eras, because most of the time people who gamble no matter if it's a recession or not. So that actually didn't change it. But what's different this year versus the past is the actual casinos were closed down. So until we know that revenue projection, the governing board at the during the spring had told us to wait on holding the amount to give out to each school, which we allocated a certain portion to until October. And so we're waiting on a certain portion that we're going to allocate to schools until we know what that revenue amount is due to the casino's revenue streams. And the last fund is Building Renewal 691. We don't have an allocation in that amount. As Frank applies for grants, we will put that amount in there. But again, you won't see that until the revision is completed, probably in December. But those are the main changes, and I just wanted to give that to you so that you're prepared as you start to look at it. Feel free to call me if you have questions as you're looking through the actual expenditure document, or you want to go over truth and taxation in person. Feel free. You can call me. I can meet with you in person, and then know that on July 15th, I will be doing a complete presentation that compares our 2019-20 budget to our 2021 budget so that you can see the comparisons. We'll go over all of those details. We'll talk about our tax rate, and we'll talk about adjacent ways, which creates the truth and taxation notice that we're required to post, and that's something that the board will be voting on. And with that, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. I think what we'll do is get a motion out there so that we can ask you the questions. So basically what we are looking at is that we have to approve the proposed budget for publication. And so could I please get a motion?
Madam
Sorry,
President,
I was stuck. Oh, go ahead.
This is
Yes,
Karen,
Mrs.
and
McGee.
I'll approve the proposed budget for publication.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Berry?
This is Lindsay. I just have one question. You mentioned the presentation. I think you said, was it July 15th? Is that going to be in person or over Teams?
So that presentation will be in Teams if it's a virtual meeting. It will be just like it is tonight. It will be on YouTube. We actually, our attorneys helped us put the language together for the public hearing. So people will be able to view through the YouTube, and they will be able to send us questions the day prior, up to the day prior to July 15th, so that we can make sure that we can report any of those questions and have answers for those questions from the public. Now, if you individually want to come in and talk to me about that, I would be happy to sit down and have a meeting with anyone to go over it, or to go over it on the phone. But I will do an in-depth presentation during the hearing so that not only the governing board members, but the public can understand the differences between last year's budget and this year's budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Berry, would you be able, where will we have the information posted as to the email address that people should send their questions to?
So there will be an email address that is posted on our hearing notice. We post that on the Arizona Department of Education website. We're also going to post that on our district websites. So we'll be, when people log in to Chandler Unified School District, they will see information on how to send off a question to an email address that specifically will be monitored by myself, Heather Caviar, who is the assistant business manager, and then Terry Locke, so that we make sure that we address and capture everyone's questions and concerns from the public, since we're in a different era of receiving public comment. So it will be located on our website. It'll also be located on the hearing notice that we're required to post to Arizona Department of Education. So those are the two main areas. And then the Truth in Taxation is actually a advertisement in the newspaper. So they'll see the advertisement in the newspaper, and it will also have where to send questions and concerns up to July 14th to answer questions. And then they have to go to the YouTube to watch. They'll have to watch the board meeting to actually get their answers.
And when will the Truth in Taxation publication actually be published?
It will be posted 10 days prior to the board meeting. So okay. We will, after tonight's board meeting, then we'll finalize with the newspaper and get it published. And it can't be 20 days, but it has to be prior to 10 days. So we'll finish that in the morning, and then we'll post it in the newspaper.
Thank you. I do have a little bit of a question for the adjacent ways. Mm-hmm. And I know that in the past, when we have done some major construction projects, we have had to do the special assessment for adjacent ways. And we had been concerned about the actual amount or the rate that would be assessed per home. And I was wondering how we are working at controlling that amount.
Great question, Ms. Marsden. So we actually have been working with Randy Stein from Stiefel quite a bit lately, because we wanted to make sure. We had learned from back in 2000, I believe it was 14, when we had built Castile. We had a large amount for adjacent ways for the utilities and access out to Castile and Auxerre. And during that time, we had also had a deficit, a cash balance, an issue related to taxes, and we had an increase from a 10% override to a 15% override. One thing we learned from that is how can we minimize that as much as possible. And so this year, what we did was we made sure when we structured the sale of our bond, that when we sold our bond just recently, we also knew we would need adjacent ways to finish the new high school. So we structured the bond sale, knowing how much principal and interest and debt service, to make sure that we stuck to what the voter pamphlet said, and we would not go over on the amount that we would be charging in our secondary tax. We then also knew, because we had that amount in adjacent ways, and we knew what the qualifying tax rate was from the state. So our actual tax rate that you can see on the sheet that I provided you is going to be slightly less than our tax rate last year. So we have structured it to make sure that we keep a very flat tax rate as best possible. So we've been working really hard on that, so our taxpayers shouldn't see a jump except for if their assessed value goes up quite a bit. I can't control that piece, but we have been able to minimize the tax rate. Last year's tax rate was 6.4698, and this year we're projecting 6.4224. So there could be a slight adjustment. They might have to pay more taxes if their assessed value of their home goes up, but otherwise that flat is very, very minimal, or the tax will be pretty minimal. That's been a strategy we've used to make sure that our taxpayers aren't seeing this up and down tax rate, and trying to make sure that we keep in mind, that their tax bill tries to stay as flat as possible, and also what the voter pamphlet approved and what they approved. And Ms. Mausden, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I would like to make sure that we can control that and minimize that for the taxpayers, so that we don't see those jumps and those the bounces in taxes that are so disturbing, especially during the times that we're seeing right now. So is there another way to fund the adjacent ways construction?
So yes, there is. You could use bond dollars to fund the adjacent ways allocation. So you would be able to access more of your bond dollars, but the voters have approved $290 million in the 2019 bond. And this is another avenue for us to be able to access additional funds outside of the M&O budget, the capital budget, and your bond budget to fund the additional cost of construction related to the new high school and the new elementary. We typically do have a certain amount that we try to save up, and that's why we have $1.4 million in the Adjacent Ways Fund to use for the elementary. But with the large high school, and it's our last high school potentially, that's going to cost a big chunk. After that, you should just see small amounts to be able to maintain adjacent ways, bus lanes, and also utilities that are adjacent to public ways for our, all of our square footage and facilities across the school district. So every year you'll see a small amount, but this will be the last time we probably ask for a large amount. It's because we're building 2 schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions from board members? Mr. Evans?
I had a question.
I think that's Mrs. Bruner.
I think she might be on mute.
Is there a way that we could see the impact?
Can you ask that question again, Ms. Bruner?
We're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, that's taking it back.
Is there a way that we can get information regarding the impact of COVID-19 on our district and look at what we've spent and what we've taken in?
Yes, I believe that Mr. Fletcher and I are going to put the totals together related to salaries, benefits, each of our big programs, for example, community education, food service, construction, and then items we've been buying for PPE, overtime, all of those things. So once the year ends, the fiscal year ends, we're going to have a much better idea of where we're at, since salaries are now by June 30th will be paid out. And then we know approximately our advice of encumbrance. We know how much encumbrances are left. We should be able to do a projection for you. So hopefully as soon as June 30th is over, we'll be able to analyze a lot of that. And then we will get a presentation out to the governing board on those expenditures and what we've expensed and the revenues we've lost, and hopefully majority of the expenses we think we've taken on because of COVID-19.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from the board? Mrs. McGee?
No, thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Not at this time. Not at this time, thanks.
And Ms. Love?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Since there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and vote on the approving the proposed budget for publication. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Great. Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Berry. We appreciate it. And so our next order of business is proposed amendments to the 2021 school calendar. Dr. Castile.
I'm coming.
Mrs. Berry, would you be able to take down the documents? Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, I know we've gone over this a bit in the study session, but at this time, the administration is recommending delaying the start of school by 2 weeks, making up the 180 required days by eliminating the first week of October and March intersessions. The start date for all students would then be August 5th. New teachers will return July 22nd. Returning teachers would officially begin on July 29th. The fall intersessions would be October 5th through the 9th. The spring intersession, March 5th through the 19th of 2021. Winter intersession would remain the traditional 2-week break, December 21st through January 1st, 2021. Early release days for parent-teacher conferences have been adjusted. The calendar will be posted and disseminated as we would typically do. As I mentioned in the study session, we have 3 or 4 reasons why we're requesting this 2-week delay. We certainly are hoping we're going to see some improvement in the COVID-19 spread in the state with the mandate of the masks and other promotions they are doing relative to social distancing and all the sanitizing and good health habits that the state is promoting. You saw what we were trying to do in the online program and the Elementary Connect. We'd like a little more time to refine those options and promote and market them to our families so they are, the changes are clearly understood. We would like to give our families sufficient time to investigate these options and then declare their level of interest, hopefully choosing to remain in Chandler and choosing one of the options being presented this evening. And fourth, this time would be incredibly beneficial for training for our staff, especially our teachers, but also for some of our paraeducators and other support staff that can benefit from the technology training in particular and preparing for the new delivery system. So for those reasons, we are requesting a 2-week delay. I can guarantee you the time will be well used. This would give our teachers an opportunity to earn some extra money for the training. We will be paying for that, and it would more than likely it'll all be online training and supervised through our district system. I shared with you also how we would mitigate the delay in pay that the teachers will experience by strategically distributing the pay for performance and trying to offset the delay in pay. Again, reiterating for the community and the board that the total amount of the contracts will remain the same. They will be just distributed a little differently, a little later, but the support staff, on the other hand, may find a benefit if they can hold out, and this doesn't cause too much difficulty because normally they would go over the intersessions. Many of our employees, they don't get paid over the intersession. So with that week delay, with the change of the week in March and October, there would be some benefit to them there. Anyway, we're recommending approval of this adjustment in calendar at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Castile. Could I please get a motion from one of the board members?
Madam President, this is Dave Evans, and I move that we approve the proposed calendar for the school year 2021.
This is Karen, and I'll second.
Okay. Are there any questions for Dr. Castile? Mr. Evans, I see
This
you.
is Karen.
Oh, Karen, yes, go ahead.
Dr. Castile, do you happen to know if there has been any thought given by the governor or the Board of Education to change that required 180 days for this particular 2021 calendar year, school year?
Mrs. McGee, there has been no discussion related to that issue. As far as I'm aware, we are being encouraged to bring our kids back to school, or at least provide some quality instructional experiences based on the last several months. So there has been no discussion to reduce the number of required days or increase them.
Thank you.
Are there any other board questions?
Madam President, Dave Evans.
Yes.
Dr. Castillo, I wanted to go back to the study session, and I wanted to thank you for the words you spoke as you talked about really the anxiety families are feeling one way or another in terms of preparing their kids and entrusting their kids to us as we look at trying to find a way to educate them that'll be the most effective and most productive and most efficient for them. So I know you're struggling with this as much as any parent is struggling with sending their child back to school. And I know that you're struggling with this as much as any educator or staff member who has to go back into the classroom and try to protect the people in that classroom. So I just wanted to thank you for really being straightforward about that. That was very impactful to me. I don't feel like this is the best solution, but I also don't want to be, one of those people who thinks the sky is falling in. We have to do something to help our kids and families. And so I think this is a great solution. I was not in favor of delaying the school year, but at the same time, you all had the foresight to realize that we're not completely safe yet, and that was the right thing to do as the numbers go up. So thank you for that as well. It's not the greatest solution, but at least we can allow people to begin to plan for the next year for their families. So that's where we are. We have some excellent options. These aren't totally new things to us. Online's been around for I think Dr. Gilbert said 9 or 10 years. So we have people in place who have been doing that. We have some people who need some refreshing and some updating and some new training to be able to build relationships with students. So I'm sorry, I guess I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you.
Well, Mr. Evans, I think if you'll recall, just been talking to all of you individually over the course of the last few months. And initially our thought was we were looking forward to the intersession or keeping the calendar the same, because all the predictors out there were that the flu was going to come back in October, November time zone, and we'd have a 2-week quarantine built right into our schedule for everyone. And like I mentioned before, this pandemic has been so unpredictable, and it seems like every time someone makes a prediction, it takes its own turn. And that's why we thought another 2 weeks will give us some breathing room. I really can't emphasize how much we're looking for additional training for our teachers. We already had planned a day of training when they reported back to work, but this will just give us more quality time with them and to refine the options. And we do want to enhance and make that online even more effective. So thank you for your nice comments.
Are there any other questions from board members? Laura.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for gathering input from the staff and from the community. And I realize the timing isn't always ideal with those. We were trying to create a plan by having stakeholders. I believe there was more than 40 people working on the committees to make us figure out what school would look like. And that takes a lot of work on the part of many individuals, including deciding when to start, as well as what does it look like when we start. And so, to be honest, I had mixed feelings about the 2-week delay. I'm not sure if it's going to make much of a difference with COVID. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But what I think makes me realize the need for these 2 weeks is to see all the in-depth involved changes that we're making for the elementary online. And we can't just expect a teacher to roll into that with absolutely no support. We have to give them time and training. I appreciate that we are going to provide training before contracts start as well as after contracts start, since teachers come in a week before students do. And I know it's a burden for families who have already planned vacations. And I hope we can have flexibility for those families. So if they still need to go, that the teachers can work with those families to make it as a smooth transition as possible for those students to catch the material that they're going to be missing while they're gone that 1 week, if they already have plans. So I just wanted to mention, I know all of us have considered that as well, that it's not easy on families who have plans already. But if we want to do it right, if we want to do it well, if we want to meet the bar for what Chandler generally meets for our education, we need time to make sure that the online model is going to work and that we support the folks who are going to pour their hearts out into that program.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bruner. Appreciate it.
Mrs. Bruner, I want to also say thank you for your comments, because I have very similar sentiments in that I do know that some families have made plans. Some children look extremely forward to their 2 weeks vacation in the fall, and honestly, I think a lot of students are very ready to get back to school right now, even, and a little bit of a delay is going to be a disappointment to them. But I also agree with you that we need the time to train our teachers to make sure that we can give the best educational experience to our kids, and our families and community expect that of Chandler. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Are there any other comments or questions from any board members?
This is Lindsay. I don't really have any questions, but I think that, everything that, could have been said and, all the ways that this could have been explored, I think were stated now and in the study session. It's definitely not an easy decision, but, I do think that Dr. Castile is right. We need some time to prepare and go into this, appropriately, without cutting corners, to deliver the best that we can. So thank you so much for clarifying that and all the work that everyone has done on this.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry. I anticipated that Mrs. Bruner was going to say something she didn't get to. So I just want to give her some kudos too, because first of all, we have two options. We have an option for parents who don't want their children to come back to a physical building and be educated that way. So we have an option for them at every age. It has challenges, but we have an option for them to be safe right now if that's what parents choose. We also have an option for students to come into class, and Ms. Bruner's brought up quite a few times, the social distancing actually is a huge aid along with the masks. And this week earlier, she outlined a plan that was more of a blended learning plan, which I have a feeling that's where we're going to be if this virus continues the way it has anyway. And I have a feeling we're looking right now at the technology that we need to get to that at some point. We have a lot of people who are experts at that on our staff and in our administration. And her plan was actually brilliant. I don't know how she did it so fast. I know that her district's not using it the way she planned it out, and I think it would be smarter if they did, since they were more prepared for that from a technology standpoint. But I just wanted to thank you, Laura, because that was really, really well done and really thoughtful. I just don't think we're quite ready for it yet, but I'm predicting that we'll be there in the next few years, because this is a really good opportunity for us to try to reinvent education and really do some innovation. So just so you know that that was a great plan, and I have a feeling we're going to move that way eventually, or education across America is going to move that way eventually. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. So if we're all ready to vote on the calendar, let's go ahead and get that. We still have a number of items to go tonight. So all those in favor of the proposed amendments to the 2021 school calendar, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Dr. Castile, we now have face coverings.
Madam President, members of the board, in compliance and trying to, well, I mentioned in the study session, our schools operate out of 3 different municipalities, Queen Creek, Gilbert, and Chandler, with the majority of our schools being in Chandler. The county, Maricopa County, the city and towns that we operate in, and we did check the resolutions. They consistently say age 6, but I think it was Mrs. Bruner's suggestion, if I'm not mistaken, that we change that to first grade. Six-year-olds are typically in first grade. So we'll say all patrons 6 years of age or above are required to wear face mask coverings in public places where persons are unable to maintain continuous physical distancing of 6 feet or more. We're also requesting that you give me the authority to adjust the precautionary measures as the county and local governments regulations change. And I would commit to you that I would not do that without a great deal of counsel, but because we don't have another board meeting, our board meetings are every 2 weeks, that if we needed to move rather quickly, I would have the authority to do that. You also gave me that authority when you did the resolution when we closed the schools. And I don't think there was a time when I disappointed you or misused it. So it's just for ease and to make adjustments. I will share with you, based on what I know about our elementary teacher-pupil ratio, it is probably one of the most favorable in the state. If you could divide the kids up equally, and we could put 22 children in every elementary classroom. That's without special education, knowing they're smaller. We believe that we are going to, in many, many cases, get to, we're able to social distance in our elementary schools, in the classrooms, so that they are not encumbered by a face mask. But again, time will tell once we find out which of our parents, what choice they'd like, match that up with the teachers that are interested in teaching in that model. We will have some time to look at that. I guess I'm getting out of this agenda item, but social distancing is in this physical distancing is in this item. And Mrs. Bruner, you asked a question as what is our cut and dry number? You know, in the past we haven't had one, but we have liberally added teachers when we had classrooms available. So I will work with Mr. Narducci, and I'm sure we'll work together to make sure if something is out of control and it just doesn't feel right or look right, that we will add a teacher where we can. We're recommending approval of the face coverings for our patrons, our children and staff 6 years and above. When social distancing, they are unable to maintain social distancing 6 feet or more. Thank you.
Dr. Castile, were you interested in changing the age to actually a grade level?
I'm sorry, I did, yes. First grade, I'm sorry. I wrote it down above it and I looked at the 6. So yes, first grade and above.
Mr. Evans, would you like to make a motion?
Oh, thank you, Madam President, for saying that, because I didn't want to have to go back and make amendments to it. Yes. I move that we approve the wearing of face coverings based on, oh gosh, I'm sorry. You confused me, Dr. Castillo.
First grade.
I move that we approve the wearing of face masks for all.
Face coverings.
Face coverings for all people on our sites beginning in first grade and above.
This is Karen, and I'll second the motion.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion or questions?
I'm one of those people who looks for loopholes all the time. So I was like, well, let's see. I started school when my mom was my teacher, so I had to repeat kindergarten because I was 4 when I started. But so I was not 6 when I started first grade. So thank you for catching that.
I will have to say, my son was one of the oldest kids in his class and turned 6 in kindergarten in early September. So it would have been very awkward for him to be wearing a mask when nobody else in the classroom was, if we had the 6-year-old. So I think this is a good change that we're looking at. Because of the county and the cities and the rules that we are having, I know that we do have a number of parents who are very concerned about their children wearing a mask, and I can appreciate that. I don't feel as though we have a lot of choice in this matter as a board, because it says all places of public accommodation. We are a school district and we are an area of public accommodation. I know that our district will be able to work with families and children who really do have medical issues and other issues that will be causing a lot of anxiety within their families, or having the child have anxiety with wearing a face mask. And but I do have faith that our district will be able to work with those individuals who do need to have some accommodations made. And whether it's the not wearing a face mask, but wearing a face shield, but it is a main, it does help stop transmission between people. A mask does make our staff safer, and our children safer. I am convinced of that, being a former medical professional myself. I've seen this, that it makes a difference. Anyway, those were my comments. Mrs. Bruner?
Thank you. So I just wanted to add that I realize this is a hot button issue. I realize it's a polarizing one. I have not seen so many nasty comments on both sides on social media in a long time, except over masks. It's amazing. And so, many people have contacted us. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have contacted us on many of these issues, masks being one of them. And so I sought out medical community folks who I respect and asked, also looked at the research, and there is mounting evidence that masks reduce transmission, especially when you get all people involved who are interacting to wear them. In addition, we probably will not have 6 feet of space between our students. So it makes it even more necessary for there to be masks at school. In Asia, we see that students are able to comply at a very early age. I trust our teachers. They are amazing folks who can get kids to do anything by spinning it in the right way. And kids care about each other, and they're going to make a sacrifice. It's not something anyone enjoys, wearing a mask. Unless you're at Comic-Con, who enjoys wearing a mask? Nobody does. But if we look at it through the lens of that we're doing this for each other, I think kids are willing to make that sacrifice for the health of everyone, as well as our families. My issue with the way this proposal already lists is that we actually are not meeting the county guidelines, because we, as you just said, will have many 6-year-olds in kindergarten. Most children turn 6 in kindergarten. And so they will not be wearing masks in a public place, and it will be violating the county order. So my actual, and maybe I didn't make it clear during the during the study session, but I think we should have masks for kindergarten through 12 because of that issue. In addition, it's very difficult for when kids are, switching classes or whatever, and the first graders see the kindergartners aren't wearing masks. Why do they not have to wear a mask? How come I have to wear a mask? I think the school should follow the whole policy, and it makes enforcement easier on all the other teachers as well. And my other issue with the way it's written currently is that I really do believe, as I said during the study session, that this policy should not be changed mid-quarter when people joined a modality of instruction under the assumption that restrictions were going to be in a certain way. I think that if things change in the middle of a quarter, we can wait a few weeks to the end of the quarter to change the mask policy and any other policies, by the way, that are related to distancing or cleaning or, any of those things, hand washing, sanitizer. So that families, when they commit to the quarter, they know what they're getting themselves into. It's a priority. A person's safety is a priority more than their comfort. We'd like both to happen, but the reality is of the situation right now, both can't happen, unfortunately. And none of us like it, but we have to follow the safety for our teachers and for our students. So for those two reasons, I can't vote for this unless we amend it to include those two things. And I'm not sure. I guess I would have to move to amend that, and then we can discuss that. Would you like me to do that, Mrs. President?
I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing.
Would you, to discuss the two things I just mentioned, would you like me to make a motion to amend the original motion?
I think that you should ask the individual who made the motion if he is willing to amend, and if Mrs. McGee is willing to support that amendment. That might be the best. Mr. Evans, you're on deck.
Yes, I'd be willing to change my motion.
Would you restate it? Please.
Mrs. Nye, can you tell me what I said last time?
Yes, I had to unmute. Approve the guidelines for face coverings for first grade and above as presented, and give the superintendent the authority to adjust the precautionary measures at the county and or local state government regulations change.
Mr. Evans, may I make a suggestion that you just say all students?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I guess if we have preschool, that won't work. Okay, and they're kept separate. Sorry.
I said all that? I can't even find that written. Okay. Madam President, I make a motion to require that all students from kindergarten, all people in our school district buildings from from kindergarten and older wear face masks, face covering while on site.
Mrs. McGee?
I think we need to add and give the superintendent whatever that verbiage was.
Mr. Evans, why don't you just say you're going to amend the age at the school and leave it the same?
Madam President, I'm going to start over. I move that in compliance with Maricopa County city and town guidelines, all patrons from kindergarten and older are required to wear face coverings in public places where persons are unable to maintain continuous physical distancing of 6 feet or more.
And are you going to give the superintendent the authority?
And furthermore, I move that we give the governing board gives the superintendent the authority to adjust the precautionary measures as the county and or local government regulations change.
I'll second. This is Karen.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Madam President, this is Lindsay. Mrs. Bruner can correct me if I'm wrong, but, it sounded like Laura was making the proposal that it was not changed at will, especially when parents have committed to the in-person model, and the anxiety or the lack of options when that is changed kind of leaves those students and their families locked into something that is potentially unsafe for them.
I do believe that, and this is my assumption, that Dr. Castile does understand the will of the board, that we would prefer to, we definitely want it to be done. Those changes are implemented at the quarters as best practices. Whether we as a board feel as though that's necessary to put it in as one of our action items, I guess is a personal opinion. I personally will trust her to follow the guidance of the board once she knows that we are interested in making sure that those changes do not occur unless they are at a quarterly time frame, so that families do have time to make the decisions as to whether they want to stay in the program that they are in or move to a different program. That's my opinion.
Can we get clarification though from Mrs. Bruner, because she made some very awesome points that I agree with. This was a difficult one for me to vote for without all students being included. I do appreciate the families who worry about the social emotional needs of students, right? But at the bottom of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is physical. And that physical requires, diligence to help. And I am so thankful that Mrs. Bruner made this motion, because it was a difficult one for me that we were not putting health first. I am the champion of, social emotional needs, but those physical needs are a priority, and we should be prioritizing that at this point. So if I could get just some clarification from Ms. Bruner as to what she meant, to make sure that we are adequately including that into this doctrine regarding face coverings.
I would say, I trust Dr. Castile. If she understands our intent, and if we're in agreement that we don't want to make a change to a model in the middle of the model when a family does not have the opportunity to change model. So that if any changes are made, whether it's face covering or others, that would be made at the quarter to families with some notice, of course, so that families can make the best choice. Dr. Castile, are you comfortable with that?
Yes. I am. And certainly, like I told you before, I would be consulting with you on an individual basis so that we could make plans, getting lots of input from families and so forth, so you have a good read. But I do understand you want this to occur at the quarter, on a quarter basis.
Thank you. And then I just also wanted to mention in the study session, we also talked about the option for, other clear versions, if that's more appropriate for a student, and those kind of things to meet the needs of different learners and staff as well. In case people were not here for our study session, there's options that's why it's called coverings rather than masks, right?
Correct.
For clear face guards.
Which is, I think, yes, I am on, I'm sorry, I am live, which is why we wanted to make sure that the motion didn't say face masks, but it said face coverings. So, because that includes additional options. So, yes.
This is Karen, and I think that if Maricopa County, though, removes the requirement of wearing face coverings, and it's not the end of the quarter, that we should maybe revisit this discussion, because otherwise I think we're going to get a lot of pushback from our parents, and especially if we roll over to the second quarter, and if Maricopa County removes that restriction at the beginning of the second quarter, then we've got almost another whole quarter to require face coverings. So I'd like to keep that option open, that we revisit, depending upon what Maricopa County and our cities do.
Well, Mrs. Mausden, I would ask that you just work with me, and we'll both be watching it very closely, and we certainly can bring it back for discussion if there's any changes to the quarter aspect or any unique decisions are made out there that would cause us to revisit it publicly in a public meeting.
And I think that that's a good idea. I think we do need to retain our flexibility with this and be allowed to have the idea that, yes, we would like to have it on a quarterly basis, but we all know that this disease is unpredictable, and everything that we plan today is probably going to be different in the next week. So
don't say that.
Yeah, well, it seems to be the case in so much of this at this point. So, but the basis on it is that we are trying to protect not only our children and our students who are in our schools, but also our staff members. Our staff members are much more susceptible to COVID than many of the children are. And we have many staff members who are in the range that and or have underlying conditions that are more susceptible, and protecting those teachers and those people who are interacting daily with those students is to me extremely important. Mr. Evans, did you have something else to say?
Yeah, and I hate to say this, but because of the fact that I'm always trying to figure out loopholes, and I'm that kid. I was that kid in school who wears the mask on the back of my head or does crazy stuff and does dumb stuff. Man, yeah. This is something we all have to do right now. It's a requirement that we all have to do, whether you think it's safe or it's a waste of time. We all have to do this right now. There are no options. There's no choice. You can go to another district if you want, but you're gonna find the same thing in Arizona there too. But my point is, different people have different levels of anxiety, and I had to run out to get some errands done yesterday, and in my favorite store. And one of the nicest things that I saw, the most thoughtful thing that I saw happening, was the store made announcements every time somebody came in the door with no face covering on. And they want people, they've always wanted people to wear face coverings. So they made an announcement, but it wasn't like, hey, you You know, it wasn't punitive. We can't be punitive and make this, as frustrating as it may be, because kids want to do things that kids want to do. We can't like blame kids for being kids and not wearing that mask. We can't make it a negative thing. The store said, you know, for the safety of everybody else, we know maybe you forgot. We know maybe this isn't something that you want to do, but we want to make sure everybody has the same level of comfort. So could you please either go back out to your car and get a face covering, or they didn't say leave. They just said, could you please be compliant with everybody else right now, just to care for everybody around you. And that's the way we need to be in our schools too. We don't need to make it, hey, you're doing it wrong, you get out of here. So just thought I needed to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Well, if we are ready to vote on this, I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of our face coverings policy, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Our next item is to approve the plans to reopen schools. Dr. Castile, you're up again.
I'm going to read the recommendation, and then I will turn this over to Dr. Gilbert and Mr. Narducci to finish your question and answers. On June 10th, 2020, the work of our 40-member task force presented their plan for reopening our schools. In addition, results from the June 2nd, 2020 parent survey were shared. Subsequently, employees were surveyed on June 16th, 2020, with the results shared during this evening's study session. Hundreds of emails, which feels like thousands, hundreds of emails and phone calls and messages have been received and have helped us formulate tonight's recommendation and really try to focus on doing, not trying to do too much and doing a lot of stuff, but trying to narrow the options and do them really well. The landscape related to COVID-19 is changing daily, and we have to remain flexible and steadfast in our commitment to serve our families. Based on the latest information, the administration is recommending online and in-person models of instruction be offered to the Chandler Unified School District families. And at this time, I will turn it over to you, Madam President, for finishing the questioning and discussions on the two options. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that we were last talking with Mrs. Bruner, and she was asking questions about the elementary. Can we finish the elementary and then go on to our secondary?
I think it was Mrs. Love.
I'm sorry. Yes, it was Miss Love. I'm sorry.
You know what, can you come back to me? I am sorry, I'm looking through my notes because I wasn't prepared to start right now.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Narducci about the elementary program?
I did have one general question that kind of applies to both. So maybe I can ask Mr. Narducci first. And that is exactly when, many folks have asked me this in email and I could not answer it. When would we shut down a class, shut down a school? At what point? What are the criteria that we're following that determine when things need to get closed down?
Great question. We work really closely with the Department of County Department of Health. They would be in contact with our schools based on any number of positive COVID cases. The determination will be made and co-jointly with any portion of a school, a classroom, a building, or a school within our district that would need to be closed. We already, in quadrant 4, we have that covered, and we'll be quick to be able to continue learning for those students if there was a need to have a campus closed, a program closed, for a hallway. The time and duration will be determined in conjunction with the state and county based on proper cleaning and an inspection of that facility. So the protocols will come from cases that are actually positive or and the number of cases. And again, when that happens, we're working with them directly and it's immediate. It's not like we can wait. So communications will go to our families, as much communication and accurate communication as possible. I want our families to know, though, that we will be quick to jump into quadrant 4, which will be continued student learning for the duration that the closure may warrant.
Do we have any examples of what they are right now, so we have a general idea of what to expect from the health department? And then also, could you explain quadrant 4 for people who may not know? Because that also was a very common question to know. If my student's class does shut down, do I move to online? Do I move to something else? What's happening?
So if Dr. Castillo, did you want to say something there? Or?
I just wanted to tell you, Lindsay Hartley is still online if you want her to embellish after you're done.
That's great. And Lindsay, I didn't realize you're still online, so you can add to the conversation. The quadrant 4, let me just briefly explain that if we have to close a school campus or a portion of it, quadrant 4 would automatically work with us in either providing the online or a virtual environment for those students. That virtual environment may also connect kids to learning because it's temporary. It may not be a long term. And so then when they're able to come back to the brick and mortar building, they really haven't missed a beat. The classroom teacher would work from the brick and mortar in-person teaching model straight to a virtual model, which will include all subjects. And so in much of the same if we had to close down a campus or more than one campus. We had to have experience with that in the past with H1N1, where we had to close down a couple of programs at a school based on the after-school programming, since the close down or shut down happened during an intercession break, and we were quick to act. And there is it's an immediate action and reaction. But quadrant 4 is in place for when we open and need to close. So we have, again, working closely with state and county officials as they will help guide us through those processes. Lindsay, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, thank you. Looking at how we do disease reporting right now in the schools, obviously with COVID being new, we will follow many of the same guidelines as far as reporting. The state does have to report that to us. There's no, the physician's office or the hospital will report it to the state. They will contact us. If we do get self-reports, we will contact the state so we can maybe try to get ahead on things. But as far as closures go, there's really no guidelines that they've set forth other than it will be a case-by-case basis. It will depend on exposure. It will depend on close contact. It will depend on what precautions were in place where that person tested positive. So, each case will be different as we come back. And I'm sure that as we go through the weeks, they'll develop more of a protocol and we'll start to see trends. But where this is new for all of us, I think right now in every discussion I've had with them, we'll just have to all communicate together to make those determinations, just like Mr. Narducci said.
One more follow-up for that. For staff members, let's say they're exposed and they need to be quarantined for 14 days. And then 2 months later, they're exposed again. Can someone explain? I know there's some rules that are guiding this, and it seems like they only apply to the first exposure. And can someone explain that? I don't know if that's Mrs. Cooper or Miss Nance.
I would be happy to, Ms. Bruner, explain that. The Families First Coronavirus Act is one that would allow paid leave for up to 10 days or 80 hours of time for an employee who qualified. That would be quarantine with exposure or seeking the contact if they contacted or contracted the COVID-19. But if we have to, if after that is exhausted, Families First Coronavirus Relief Act does not provide for an additional 80 hours. But if we reassign an employee to home because they are quarantined or they've been exposed or they've contracted the disease, then we are going to allow them to, in those circumstances, to work from home or give them paid administrative leave, so we will not take it out of their own leave balance. And part of that is just because we don't know what to expect for employees. We want to protect them and protect their leave if it's an employment-related situation. But in addition to that, we do not want people to show up to work sick. And we want them to stay home, and we don't want leave or paid leave or the fear of unpaid time to be a factor that causes them to come to work when they have symptoms.
Thank you. And to piggyback on that with the sub situation, could you just share a little bit about that? There were many staff members that are concerned since we're short on subs in normal times.
Exactly. Well, we are doing what we can and taking advantage of a little bit of a sad situation with the unemployment to increase our sub pool, and we hope that that will work. But we're also looking at logistically how we can target subs to a particular location if we have an incident at a particular school, which causes some of our employees to, more than normal, of our employees to be out. And we're looking at maybe having permanent subs that we can use in the district that would be more familiar with particular schools and be available, and also training our subs, given the fact that we're going to have some different models of instruction, so that when we do have subs coming in, we will, it would be, there would be continuity for the students.
Thank you for putting so much thought into our staff members.
Thank you.
Ms. Love, I think, are you ready now?
Yes, I apologize.
That's
my
okay.
notes got twisted around with all the documents I have on my table, so I apologize. For the online option for elementary level students, where do we have any plans to support any families who maybe speak a different language, and can the curriculum be modified to the home language of the family?
That's a great question. I don't believe, I think the model of instruction will be our SEL model and our English language learner model. Jessica or Colleen, you may be able to speak better to the Chandler Online Florida Virtual if that's in other languages. And to my knowledge, it's in English, and the teacher would have to make the SEL accommodations or ELL accommodations for students who require by law the 100 minutes at secondary and the 120 minutes at elementary. If there's anyone online here that can give us additional information that are familiar with the Chandler Online program, if that differs.
Frank, the online doesn't translate, but we can work with Monica's office to translate family support documentation.
I just also have a question too about, I think it was asked in our study session about the availability of computers for families who don't have them. But the other piece for me is that computer literacy with the parents, especially for our younger kids, because they're going to have to rely on their parents to support them. So are there any plans to support with that?
Mr. Narducci, I can address that too if you'd like, because we planned a little bit this morning, but also
sure, Dr. Edgar.
Things to think of. So yes, we have discussed what type of professional development that we need to provide for staff, students, and recognizing that the developmental level of computer navigation for our students in the elementary is very different than some of the independent computer pieces that our junior high and high school students have. So it's critical that we provide some services for our parents, and that's going to be we'll be working with Monica Romero and her department, as well as just working with the administration of Chandler Online Academy to make sure that those opportunities are available for parents, and that we do have support available should there be any issues in the navigation of the Florida virtual system, getting into different technology pieces. But we do have that in the works. So we can come back to you with a better list of opportunities for our parents.
And also, Ms. Love, when computers are checked out to families, there'll be a little bit of a training there on the use of it, but there will be always access to for technology support, as well as for curricular support for our families, so that they don't feel like they're navigating it alone, just as they would be at a school.
And I also have a question, and actually I think this might be for our secondary piece. So I'm jumping ahead of myself. So I think I am good to move on.
Okay. I do have a couple other questions. It might be applicable to both elementary and secondary, but who would be responsible for doing any of the contact tracing for the students? Is that going to be the Department of Health, or will it be a school responsibility and the district's responsibility?
Lindsay, if you have information on that, would you mind responding? Contact tracing. I don't know if Lindsay Hartley, our nurse coordinator, is online still, but I would have to look that up to see where that contact tracing would occur.
Mr. Narducci, I believe the conversation with Ms. Hartley, and she could clarify, is that is working with the nurses or health assistant at each site, along with Ms. Hartley working with the Department of Health and moving on the guidance that we receive from them. But we could get more information for you, Ms. Mazin, to be able to share.
Great, thank you. And then the other question I have goes to Sandy Cooper again. We were talking about our teachers. If somebody gets, exposed 14 days, what about our paras? What about our support staff? How will that look for them? I know they're an hourly person, and I know that there's also different rules for some of our hourly people than there are for a salaried individual.
Right. But the same Family Medical Leave Act applies to them, so they qualify for the same type of leave, paid leave. They would also qualify if we as a district reassign them to home, to work from home, or to reassign them to home if they were quarantined for a period of time. So we would apply the same types of practices with our support staff as well.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I guess we will move on then. If there's no other questions for elementary, we will move on to our secondary. And Ms. Love, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Perfect. All right, let me go to my secondary questions. So I guess my question too is with the online curriculum. I'm getting a lot of feedback from teachers in terms of wanting to see something more interactive with grades 7 through 12. Is that something that's in the works, and is that something that can be presented, so that way we can work on engaging those students?
Well, we've been looking at how we can expand and have more interaction with students, with teachers working within the content. It has been more of a self-paced curriculum with highly qualified teachers actually working with the students and guiding, less of the teachers giving instruction and more of the teachers giving support. When, as I mentioned in the study session, our teachers have office hours twice a week to be able to give students support, whether that be in person or on the phone or through emails. And what we're expanding to is having more connectivity, whether it be mini lessons by our teachers or continued support where it would be scheduled for the students. But we have had more discussion on how we could expand and possibly use such as Google Classroom or Google Meets, where you have groups of students working with teachers, again, in discussion of many lessons possible.
Thank you. The other thing is, and forgive me, my computer died partway through the presentation, so you may have answered it. There's a bit of a scramble there. But I'm also getting a lot of feedback from our teachers that they want to see more in terms of special education online. And they're not seeing enough in terms of like CTE courses online in the current catalog. So I don't know, you know, what your thoughts are on that. And, you know, maybe I like misheard it during the first study session because my computer died.
No, I think those are good questions. When it comes to CTE, we look at what our students are looking for in the offerings. We do the same at our schools of what are students looking for, what are they requesting to take. Most of our students take CTE courses in the brick and mortar and in person and not necessarily online. But with that being said, as we've looked at what students want, we look to see how we can offer that in the online, and we could work with Lindsay Duran through CTE to see if there are some expansions we can do in that area. As it relates to special ed education students, we work with Dr. Marshall in regards to students, whether they are full-time or part-time, in conjunction with either the support that is at the online program or the supports that each site has in regards to what the need is. I could have Ms. Marshall, Dr. Marshall, if she has anything to add in respect to that.
Hello, hi, this is Kim Marshall. Yes, we would definitely be looking on a case-by-case basis, depending upon the modality that the parent would like to have their student participate in. And again, it would depend upon the unique needs of the individual students and if their student could access the virtual curriculum with the specially designed instruction that's set out into their IEPs.
And currently when students go to the online and they have an IEP, they sit and work with someone from Dr. Marshall's team as well as the Chandler Online program to look to see what needs to be adjusted in order to address their requirements.
Yes, we would have teachers that would be they're almost like co-teachers, and they would be looking at the accommodations and what modifications could be provided so that they were to have equal access. But again, it would be very unique and individualized. And in some cases, an IEP team would need to get involved to determine if that would provide the appropriate level of a free and appropriate public education under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Thank you. I do also have a question, and my questions are more geared towards online, just because the in-person model is a little intimidating to me, so I'm going to let my peers take that over. But if a teacher needs to be teaching online, is their job secure at their home site when it's safe to come back? I've gotten that question from a lot of educators who feel like, you know, if I have to go and teach online because of my health issues or whatever, I don't know that my job is going to be safe at my, you know, home site. So I was wondering if you could clarify that.
I think that would be a question for Ms. Cooper.
Yes, so Ms. Love, would you repeat that?
Yeah, so if a teacher has to teach online because they have, you know, they're high risk or, you know, whatever reason, the question's been asked to me, you know, if they teach online, does that mean that they lose their spot at their home site when it's safe to come back?
Right. Yeah, that's, you know, they don't lose their spot at the home site, although we have to make some accommodations. So there's not any You know, when you're shifting and staffing, there's no assurance that everything is going to end up in the same place. We are going to try to accommodate and make sure that if we can, if we can, they'll get back to the same spot that they started from. And I don't know if anybody else can add to that, but to the best of my knowledge, that is our intent.
I would agree, Mrs. Cooper. We will try to get them back to their same place. More than likely, it would be after the school year rather than start shuffling people and changing who the children have had. But we'll do everything we can to provide consistency.
Thank you. I think I'm going to turn it over to other board members.
Thank you, Ms. Love. I'm sure that, I think I'll go ahead and jump in with a couple of questions. So I'd like a little bit of clarification. When a student is doing the online program and they can go back to their home school and participate in various extracurricular activities and athletics and things like that. So they're not just locked into only the online. They can get some of their socialization through some of the athletics at the school and things like that. What are the restrictions on that, if any? In our current structure, students who are full-time or they're in at least 3 classes at their home site or the home brick and mortar is their home site. There are students that currently take classes in the online and are at their home site and they're participating in athletics and extracurricular activities. With the structure of the situation that we are in, we have established that students would still be connected to their home site. So they would still be even though they would be full-time online, they would still be connected to the site that they came from to be able to continue to participate. We think that is important for the students so that they have that opportunity, which we think is very important so that they still have that connectivity. For example, you may have a student that is in the online for 5 classes, but they may be in the band at that particular site and they want to continue. And so we will make that adjustment in order to work with students because they still would be connected to their home location. Great. That really does provide a lot of options and really kind of, I think, alleviates a lot of the social, I guess, anxiety for not having a lot of social connections, especially as teenagers and as the high school. And now, what about in junior high? We don't really have that many other extracurriculars or not quite like band, but I guess they do have classes that are considered like jazz band at Willis or something. Yeah,
jazz band, orchestra. You'll still see students that will want to participate in maybe robotics. It just depends. We're going to have to look at all of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what is the difference, I guess, that between the concurrent enrollment and the statement that students may participate in athletics, extracurricular activities and graduate from their boundary or open enrolled site? What is really, or is that really the same thing?
It's the same thing. So really what you're looking at as to the plans, either you're full-time, which means you would be taking all of your courses in the online instruction model. And that goes back to you would either be committing to a quarter or committing to a semester. If you were a part-time student in that or concurrent, you would be in the brick and mortar, taking classes at your brick and mortar home site in person, as well as taking some of your classes in the online. In both of those, you would be able to participate at your home site.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Let's see. Mrs. Bruner, did you have some questions?
I do, but if I could go last, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Gilbert, you talked earlier about communication with the community college. You talked primarily about Chandler Gilbert Community College. Our end product is getting students ready to be successful in college, university. So I guess I'd like to hear more about that down the road. And I mean, that's critical, really, is preparing our students well. And now we have to do it in a different way.
Well, I think whether we have in-person or online, our focus is to prepare students for the next career, whether it's looking at careers or on college and careers from that perspective. I brought up the Chandler Gilbert Community College because that is the college that is linked to our district through the Maricopa system as it relates to dual enrollment. So we are working and having conversations with them because that has been some of the conversations that if we're online and they would normally be in person doing dual enrollment, what might that look like online? So we are continuing in conversations as to how we can address that from a district perspective. As it relates to courses that students are taking, we still feel that we are strong in whether you are in the online or you are in the in-person as to what you're going to receive as it relates to curriculum and instruction and working with our team. We have had a number of students that have graduated from our online and moved to the college ranks. So we feel comfortable on both of those. As I shared before, we've been accredited to the North Central accreditation, as well as having our courses approved at the Arizona State Board of Education, as well as colleges accepting our courses for athletes that are going through the NCAA.
Right. Okay. I guess one of the pieces that you worked on a number of years ago, though, was to get us completion rates for, I think it was for freshmen in college as well as entering sophomores in terms of their persistence. And we lost that. We lost the ability to have that information. And now it just seems like it'd be critical to get that back because we are looking at a different number of modalities that, we have to be helping our students be successful as they move forward. So
we have lost in the sense of connection in some of the completion rates, but if you remember, we do have the clearinghouse that we utilize and working with our assessment department to be able to pull up information to see how our students are doing so we can work to get more of that information to you.
Right, and then obviously a lot of communication, which I know you're doing with the college president, at least at Chandler Gilbert Community College. But so other question is, if you are in college, you have, some call it a problem, but to me, it's more flexibility to withdraw from a class or say, this just isn't going to work for me. But in our situation now, some students are going to do online, and they're going to find that that's not a good way to work for them. They really need to be in the presence of a classroom and a teacher and other students. So do we have a kind of a date by which students they've made a choice, so they're limited to that choice? Do we have any flexibility whatsoever in allowing them to say, I don't want to be in a physical building, online would be a better choice for me?
Well, I think the focus is in both cases where we have families making a commitment. It is important for us for them to understand that is a commitment. But in saying that, we would do as we normally would within our district, and that is take it on a case-by-case basis if there's a situation why a student would need to move. I liken it to when you're building a schedule and you're addressing staffing for that need. If you allow a lot of moving going back and forth, then you really haven't addressed making sure that your class size or whatever you're trying to maintain is able to do that, because you're projecting and scheduling based on what your students or your parents are sharing with you in order to establish where that staffing needs to go. So we would still look at case by case if there's situations that students need to move. we would work on what does that mean and what the reason would be, and we do that.
Okay, because you and I were both 14 at one point, and we don't always make the best choices, right?
Well, we run into the situation of students wanting to change. We can look at it from an online to an in-person situation. We run into that same situation of students who selected a class and they want to change from one class to the other just in the in-person. And so we look at the situation as to what's the need, what's the reason why, and what's the feasibility.
Right. Okay. There's a lot of responsibility on our kids moving forward.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, Mr. Evans?
No, that's it. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay. Mrs. McGee.
My question sort of relates to Mr. Evans' question, but it's also for Mr. Narducci as well as Dr. Gilbert. And it's sort of reverse. If a family chooses the brick and mortar option, and then we're not at the end of the quarter, but they just are not comfortable for whatever reason, sending their child to school. Is the online option available for them, or do they have to go to Google Learns or some other form of instruction?
Well, with the two models that we have being in person and online, one of the reasons that we established the quarter or the semester, because we're working with our teachers, whether it's in person or online, in regards to the standards they're going to cover. And so in order to be consistent in making sure that there's a seamless transition from whether it's online to in person or in person to online, we have to establish some type of structure so that we're not missing and having gaps when students are moving from one to the other. So we would have to look at, again, what would be the reason that there would be movement, and how can we mitigate any gaps that would be created by moving at different times other than at the quarter of the structure, which is pretty consistent with what we try to do now, and then work through individually with those where the need arises.
And Ms. McGee, I would also agree with Dr. Gilbert for the elementary. This is new for us, and it's also new for many of our families. As we do in person, we'll take it case by case, as he has said already. We'll work with the families and the students to see what's best for them. It'll all depend on the timing and what's in place at the school. As he said, staffing is going to be based on what parents choose, and then we would look at availability. We'll work with the school principals as well, but a case-by-case basis is what we do on anyway, and we'll listen to our families and see what's needed for their students and move forward.
Okay, thank you, because I think that's real important. I mean, I understand we don't want the back and forth, but if it's for health reasons, I guess, somebody in the family has COVID or the child or student should come down with it, it would be something where we would almost really want them to switch to the online. And I'm glad to hear that we do, we'll consider a case-by-case basis and be flexible.
We definitely would look at that, and we do that now. I think it's important that we have structures in place so everybody understands the expectations that we have, but at the same time, we need to make sure that there's compassion in how we make our decisions.
Agreed. Thank you both very much. That's all I had, Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. McGee. Before we go to Mrs. Bruner, I have had some emails and some concerns from individuals, and I guess this is the big elephant in the room here, where the comments are, all of our schools were closed early on when we were only seeing 500 cases a day. Now that we're seeing 3,600 cases a day, we're planning on opening the schools. And the biggest question is, why are we opening the schools for in-person instruction? And I think that's I think it's a valid question, and I was wondering if someone could address that for us.
I don't mind taking a shot at that.
Okay.
I think ultimately we're in a situation where we have to plan and we have to prepare. We know as a school district, if we don't look ahead to see where we're going to be and get that information to our families, it's going to be difficult for us to mobilize and make sure that we're ready for whatever comes to us in the future. I think us looking at the calendar and changing it so that we give ourselves 2 more weeks may seem minimal in our perspective, but if we look at the phasing criteria that has been established by the White House and the CDC, it's every 14 days that you have to have a consistent trend before you move from criteria to phase 1, from phase 1 to phase 2, and phase 2 to phase 3. We are currently as a state in phase 1. So even if we were looking to try and open school today, if you look at that phasing criteria, school would not be open if you look at the criteria of it. So it's not until we get into phase 2 that we would open schools based on that criteria. So as we look to the future, we need to move to 2 before we can even open. So if we're opening schools, it's because the phasing that is in place says that we can open. So we have to be prepared, knowing that if we wait to see what's going to happen, we're going to be behind in moving forward. So we know that we're still in phase 1 and have to move to phase 2. But if we're not in phase 2, that's where the other discussion becomes.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Castile, it looks like you wanted to come in too. And
well, I think the governor, along with state officials and many of you, realize that the social emotional toll on a lot of our children are quite evident. And I know the state is very concerned about the rise of domestic violence and child abuse. And it's their desire that we get children engaged again with safety precautions, knowing what they know about the virus. So again, we're just trying to be better prepared and not be in crisis mode again.
Thank you. Mrs. Bruner.
Okay, so I just had 1 or 2 more questions and then just some thoughts. So I did have a question. I have had a little bit of experience with the high school online courses, as my child has taken 3 of them. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by the rigor of the content and the variation in the assessments. And you know, as a high school social studies teacher with my kids taking online social studies, I have a pretty high bar, and I was pretty happy with the online program that we have. And although it didn't have any synchronous elements in it, it looks like we might be trying to phase some of those in for high school and junior high students as well. So I guess my question is, for a student who has needs, whether it's for second language or for an IEP or those kind of things, I found the software to be lacking in accessibility. So what will, and this question may be for Ms. Marshall as well, what will we actually be doing to provide those accommodations for students who need them?
Well, I will start and then I will have Dr. Marshall tack on to that. One of the things that we try and do from the beginning when we have students moving into the online is to determine what are their needs. Whether that be working with the school, because when students are moving from a brick and mortar to the online, whether it be that they're taking one course or they're moving full-time to the online, they're working directly with the counselors at the home school to determine the need. Once it is determined whether it is language or whether it's a student that has an IEP or has services that are needed, we work again with the department at the site, and we also rope in Dr. Marshall or someone from Dr. Marshall's team to determine what that would look like. With that, I would ask Dr. Marshall to possibly expand.
Hi, this is Kim Marshall. Thank you for the question. And working with Colleen Flannery and her instructional technology team, they have come up with a really nice summary page of various accommodations that can be used with our software. And it's a very self-explanatory for any of the students with some of the accommodations. Again, it's going to be looked at regarding the students' unique needs and to ensure that they are able to access and receive a free and appropriate public education through that mode. I do want to caution, though, that not all students will be able to access a virtual environment. The IDEA in Congress did not give us any flexibilities, and so we are on the hook for providing that FAPE, so to speak, to our students. So we have to ensure that they have the access and they receive the services that are outlined via their IEP, or the IEP team needs to meet to determine what those priority goals and skills are, depending upon what mode they are able to access successfully. Does that answer your question, Mrs. Bruner?
Well, it answers that there's a sheet, but I don't know what it actually will look like for students. As someone who just experienced it and finished up last week with a student, there wasn't any interventions going on. So I guess I have concerns. We can create a sheet, but how are we actually going to provide those services and those accommodations within the online environment? Are we going to have teachers with special education certification working in conjunction with those students? Will they have time to go into Google Meets with them if they normally would be in a team taught environment? Do we have a solution for that for students who may have medical issues that can't be on campus?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for clarifying. The summer school courses were truly using accommodations, not necessarily any kind of interventions or special design instruction, but for the online options that parents choose and that students are able to access, there will be special educators that will be providing the special designed instruction, depending upon if they can do it through the co-taught and being a co-teacher with the general education teacher, or if they need to create a group or Google Meets where they have small group interaction, depending upon the strategies and programs that they are using for their students to have to make progress toward their goals. Colleen, if I think she may be available to give a little bit more clarity related to the accessibility features. But as far as actual intervention and special designed instruction, that will come from special education staff.
We've been looking at the text-to-speech availability for COA, and we'll continue to work with you to see how we implement that for our students.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to make some comments. I think after I'm done, are we voting, Ms. Mosden?
We don't actually have a motion on the table at the moment.
I'll wait to make comments until we have a motion.
So this was kind of an extension of our study session at this point. And so I do need to get, since most of our questions have been asked and we probably just need to refine and have some last minute questions, I would like to entertain a motion that we approve the attached online and in-person models of instruction for next year. So could I get someone to make that motion?
This is Karen. I have to switch from one area to another. So I will make a motion to approve the attached online and in-person models of instruction for the 2020 and 2021 school year.
Is there a second? I will second. Okay, we have there's some additional questions.
I don't have questions. I just have kind of a comment before we vote. I think that the online model is workable. And so for me, I have confidence in that we can build that up to be something great. I still am very hesitant towards the in-person model, and I just kind of want to reiterate that it's not a lack of faith in our district. I think right now it's a lack of faith in our state and the way that our state has handled COVID. And so for me, having daily classes with students and teachers exposing each other, regardless of masks, it's a hard one for me, ethically and morally, to be fully in agreement with. I do support however this goes tonight. And I think that, everyone wants, children, students back on campus. And I do, especially from an emotional standpoint, I do think that we do need to look at their social emotional needs. But I know how to intervene when there's child abuse. I know how to intervene when there's domestic violence. I am not certain how to intervene when there is COVID and we have no vaccination and no treatment options. So right now I'm just kind of stuck. And I think that the return to campus, for me to vote on this motion, I would need to feel safe with the physical and emotional well-being of our students and our teachers going back into this situation. That's all I have.
Does anyone else have some comments? Mr. Evans?
No, not really. I really appreciate and agree with what Dr. Gilbert said. Kids need to be back. We need to be prepared for them to be back. And we have to go play it by ear and try to be as cognizant of safety as we can. There are a lot of holes in everything we're looking at doing based on what we know about this virus. So I hope we can look back on it and say we did the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mrs. Bruner, did you want to say anything? I think you said.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. So first of all, I wanted to thank the committees that worked on this plan, including the online, the hybrid, and the in-person models. I wanted to thank the staff for all their emails and for CEA for getting extra feedback from their members, from families that have communicated with me via social media and email and in person and on the phone. It's really a great resource for our district that we have such engaged families and that are supportive of what Chandler Unified does. And I also want to thank the students, some of the high school students who contacted me and shared their viewpoint. A large portion of the people who contacted us were respectful and thoughtful about what they shared, and I appreciate that. The elementary model, the Chandler Connect program, is something that I think we're going to be proud of. It includes meeting the needs of exceptional students with gifted and ELL and special education programs being revised in that model. And it helps our young learners connect and socialize, which they didn't maybe get enough of in fourth quarter. And it's a whole another way of looking at virtual education. And I really appreciate all the work that went into that. I'm hopeful this program will meet the needs of the families who are not able or not prepared to attend in person. And it's the best, I guess, that we can do, considering we are not getting additional funds to reduce class size from the state. My concern is I have concerns about the in-person on campus for both our children and their extended families, as well as the teachers and other staff members on campus for elementary. It's not as serious as for the high school though, because at least they get to stay in the same room with the same number of kids all day. When we look at junior high and we look at high school, these students are moving from class to class to class to class to class to class, 6 periods, where they're in the hallways crossing each other, very crowded hallways. And some of our class sizes are as high as 35 or 40 in the high schools. This may or may not be mitigated by students enrolling in online courses. And I have gone back for weeks and weeks, back and forth in my mind about this topic. And I hope that everyone knows that I thoughtfully considered all sides and what everyone was saying. As someone who's been a teacher for 28 years in a high school, I feel that I am, my life is dedicated to kids, to teenagers. And I know for the vast majority of staff in the high schools, they feel the same way. I proposed an alternative plan to this one where we could get some kind of mitigating factor to help us feel safer with students. I proposed that a couple days ago after this model was presented to us. And it would involve us looking at how many people sign up online. If only a few people sign up online, our high schools are going to be shut down. The health department is going to come in, there will be spread, and they will shut down, and everyone will be online. So I proposed an alternative to that where we could, and Mr. Evans referenced it earlier when we were talking about another issue, where we look at what percentage of people sign up online, and then we split the half. If it's less than 50% that want to be online, then we split the 2 remaining half of the students who want to go in person. So let's say 10% want to go online. Then we would have 45 and 45%. On Monday, 45% would come and do a block schedule where they would have 3 periods a day. We currently already have block scheduled 2 days a week at the high school campuses. This would be every day of the week. And then the second day, they would do their 3 courses on the online program. And then they would come back on Wednesday and do their 3 block schedule. And they would keep having those 3 live courses. They'd have their opportunities to interact with others. They'd have reduced exposure, reduced time in hallways. And the school would help decide which courses would be which. And it would help meet the need of having enough spots online for teachers who need to be home and cannot be exposed to 150 teenagers every day in a classroom with 30 kids or 35 kids. Depending on online enrollment. So because that wasn't included, and we haven't been able to find a way to make hybrid work without sacrificing the online and having opportunities for our teachers to work from home, and without any trigger language to help us make the high schools at least reasonably safe, I can't support this plan. And it breaks my heart that I can't, because I know a lot of work went into this plan. And I wish that I could support it. I want kids back on campus. I miss my students and they miss each other. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But with this plan, with a small number of people signing up for online, our high schools will be shut down. And then we're just back to square one. So, I don't know what to say. I'm really frustrated with the situation. There's no good answer. I tried to come up with a plan that was hopefully better, but I don't, it's not part of the proposal. So I I appreciate all the work that everyone has put into what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bruner. I think everyone in the country is trying to determine what we're going to do at schools. There's no right answer. We can't make everyone, we have to come to terms with the fact that we cannot make every single person happy with what we do. We have parents who are strongly advocating to open our schools as normal. They are willing to take that risk. We have staff members who are willing to work as in the classroom. We have others who say they want to have masks for everyone and or they don't want to come to school at all. They would rather just do online. So it runs the gamut of in person, 100% in person with no restrictions, doing everything is normal, back to normal, to being very afraid for their families. And I think that we can provide options for each individual and for each family, because we have added that flexibility into our senior or our high school programs, where students can have several classes a day in brick and mortar and also do online. We're having a period where we will be asking our families to choose what model of instruction they prefer for their child. And then we will be assisting them with enrolling in that particular option. I think that families should be able to determine how they want their instruction. I also believe that once we understand how many are looking at online instruction, we can deal with looking at what our student loads are in each of the high schools and continue to work with social distancing. I know that the governor put out some additional rules and things for today in an executive order, and that our staff is looking at those carefully to find out what types of options there are. But I do believe that we are here to serve the families of our district, and that we have tried to put in the type of safeties that we can, but we are not getting more money to be able to reduce class sizes and to reduce the number of students. Our high schools are large. Anyway, Dr. Castile, do you have any comments that you would like to make, or any other board members?
Madam President, members of the board, one of the challenges, and I haven't finished the 21-page document we just got from the governor's office. Page 7, number 4. If I could read it. Must provide education in person the same number of days per week that they did last school year. In order to meet the mitigation, the financial mitigation that he's willing to do, we need to meet this criteria. And it reads, for schools that wish to offer a hybrid model with kids learning in the classroom on some days and from home on other days, they can still meet the eligibility criteria as long as they offer free on-site learning for students who need a place to go during the day. This option will need to be available for the same number of days per week and open the same number of hours during the prior school year before COVID closure took effect. We're still asking questions, but this means if we offer a hybrid for those students who are not in session with their teacher, and the thought is they would be home, we still have to provide them an opportunity for learning on site the full day, every day. That's a real challenge. That again doesn't allow us to accommodate where we would put them, how would we social distance, who is going to supervise them and be available to help them if they are to be placed in meaningful on-site learning on the school site. So that's one of the challenges we're faced. There's still a lot of questions. Again, I will tell you, I think our best course of action is to really refine and develop our online offerings and offer our in-person opportunity with all the precautions we can put in place. And the feedback from our association was that they preferred not to do the hybrid because of the complexities in their own personal lives with childcare, matching up the days that students were in session and out of session in a family, and the complexities were far greater. So we chose to narrow on the two. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Castile. Are there any more questions or comments from board members? If not, I will, so it does sound like there might be, I will go ahead and vote on this issue. I will be doing a roll call vote. Mrs. Bruner?
No.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Love?
No.
And myself, yes. The motion carries 3-2. Thank you, everyone, for all of all the hard work and all of the preparation that you had for the meeting tonight, and all of the time and efforts that you have put in to develop these plans. I do hope that there is some way that we can that we will be able to reduce our numbers of students in the high schools through online programming and online instruction. I do hope that this will allow us to have those smaller class sizes and have lower student loads within the schools, and I will be anxiously awaiting to hear the number of students that we get signed up for our online academy. So I'll be very anxious to hear how many we have and what kind of percentages of students that we have that have decided to move into those type programs. So, and I'm sure the rest of the board members will be too. I believe now we do have some information items. Our first one is our Nearpod license for junior highs and high schools. Dr. Gilbert.
Madam President, members of the board, for your information, on August 14th, 2019, the governing board reviewed and approved Nearpod as one of the social and emotional curricula for high school learning. Nearpod is an online product. The Educational Services Department will be requesting approval of the entire Nearpod lesson library for all high school and junior high schools. 9 high school sites licensed, including access to Nearpod lesson library and social and emotional learning in the amount of $53,700, and historical perspectives and literacy in the amount of $5,775. 9 junior high school licenses, including access to the Nearpod lesson library at the amount of $26,500. Also included in gratis is webinar, which is up to 3 2-hour sessions with a Nearpod trainer for up to 20 participants, that being a value of $1,350. On-site training, 1 day of training up to 6 hours with a Nearpod trainer. on site with up to 30 participants, or can be used for 3 2-hour session webinars instead of on-site day at $2,500. The total cost for the license, including tax, is $92,681.05. In accordance with ARS 15721, the curriculum will be available for public review for 60 days at the Melinda Romero Instructional Center starting June 25th, 2000. If you have any questions, I also have some experts that I think could help us with that.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board on this information item concerning Nearpod?
Dr. Gilbert, I'd love to hear from the experts. I know Colleen Flannery has been using Nearpod for probably 6 or 7 years with small groups and with educators as well. So
we also have Mr. Rother and Ms. Sweden also on the line that could assist.
This is Colleen.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that it does integrate with Google Classroom and Clever that we currently have in place. So it's something that will be easy for our teachers and our students to access. And go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, hi, David. The actual Nearpod resource can be used as a sort of an online virtual interactive lessons. As Colleen said, it can be integrated into Google Classroom. Our teachers currently use it with our SEL. And so what we're asking in this item is for just an expansion of the resources and tools that'll be available to our teachers.
So this is not really a new program for us. It is an expansion of it so that we can bring this to more students.
Correct.
So when you talk about using it for social emotional learning, there's some software, some programs that actually have triggers that can bring to light issues students are having, keywords and things like that that give them more immediate interventions, I guess.
Well, with what we're asking in terms of the expansion of this, they wouldn't necessarily be those sort of trigger lessons. They're more of interactive lessons that students can interact with in the virtual setting, where they might have a few slides that have some content, and then there's an interactive question that students have to respond to, and then a couple more slides with some more interactive sort of activities that students then have to, again, answer another question and respond to. And so it really allows our teachers to use materials that Nearpod has already created in addition to supplementing it with some of their own content. And it just makes the virtual platform that much more interactive.
Okay.
And Mr. Evans, I'm sorry, Mr. Evans, and just to clarify, we're not expanding the SEL portion of it. We're expanding from the courses that can be used in other subject areas for our teachers to be able to use as another tool as a supplement to the curriculum we already have.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Rother, you said you had teachers at your high school that have been using it for a while in some regard, at some level anyway.
Yes, yeah, that's what makes this one a little bit attractive, is that teachers already have some experience with the platform. They just didn't have access to those other lessons before. And so now there's lessons that are designed in English, math, social studies, science, world languages, fine arts, and even some of the electives that they have access to. And now they can use, tweak, adjust to meet their curriculum needs with whatever unit that they're in. And it is a more interactive virtual platform.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members? If you do want to go preview it, I'm sure that you can head off to the Melinda Romero Instructional Center. to preview and make comments on the curriculum and this product. Our next is a modifying exhibit JLF-EA. Dr. Gilbert.
Madam President, members of the board, for your information, administration is presenting the child abuse reporting form as information. This form has been updated to be a fillable form for ease of completing the form. The old form is attached for your review. We wanted to make sure that you saw this as the content hasn't changed, just the way that it could be filled out. Exhibits do not require board approval.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. I appreciate it. Are there any questions about this? It really looks pretty much the same, except it's a page longer, and I couldn't fill out the form myself, but I assume it's not active in our board packet as an active fillable document. So,
correct.
Mr. Evans?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Dr. Gilbert, I guess this is a question I've had a number of times with forms like this. So it's fillable, but then how is it cataloged and stored? Does it have to be printed? Do we have access to the reporting quickly from multiple locations if necessary for the people who actually need access to that form?
So the form and the documents still have to be saved, whether it's saved and it's stored in a book for record keeping, or whether it's stored electronically. The file, this particular document is also sent to Brenda Vargas as to all of these type of documents are sent to her, where if it's just a mandatory report, goes to myself or goes to Mr. Narducci. So we have locations where these are sent. So it would be housed at the site as well as housed at a district representative that would be designated for these.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? This will not, Dr. Gilbert, just to reiterate, this will not be coming back to us for any type of approval. It's because it's an exhibit, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Our next is our board agenda roadmap, and our next meeting is July 15th. I believe that Mrs. Nye will be looking at starting to create our roadmap for the 2021 school year after this. We will be doing our public hearing and then the adoption of the 2021 budget at the next meeting. Are there any other things that we need to be looking at for our agenda that anyone wants to suggest? Okay, our next is superintendent comments. Dr. Castile.
Madam President, members of the board, I have no comments this evening. Again, thank you for your patience, and we'll keep you posted.
Thank you. Do our board members have any comments? Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Madam President. I just, we just made a very difficult decision for every one of us, I believe. And the landscape is just changing constantly, and I feel like we just need an opportunity to make sure we're communicating and meeting prior to a 2-week schedule. I just feel the need to really be on top of this, and I know that members of the administration are, but I just want to be clued into what we're doing, where we're going, because I think it's going to be changing.
It's a good point. We need to make sure that we are communicating well as we can within the confines of, but I think that we perhaps may need to ask for updates from administration. I mean, that's a great communication channel, and if we have questions, I think that we should continue to reach out to our staff and and Dr. Castile to get the questions answered and to get updates. And so maybe we can ask her to give us a 1-paragraph blurb every so often as to what's happening. So, because I know it takes a lot of time to, communicate with everyone on an individual basis.
Right, and the reality is, Dr. Castile's been calling every day.
Yeah, I know she has.
We're changing every day, and I'm talking about Saturdays and Sundays and late at night and early in the morning, and I know she's got the hotline with the police department and medical professionals, and so it may seem like there's not a lot being done from an outside view, because you don't see that she and her staff, her people are living this pretty much every minute of every day, and they take it very seriously. So these are really difficult decisions to make.
And I think we will be talking probably daily, if not every evening and Saturdays and Sundays, but I promise you we will keep you all in the loop and informed of what's happening, what's occurring, and copy you on all the communications that go out to the families. We hope in the next 12 hours or so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just want to say to one last thing, I'm sorry. Just want to say to Ms. Love and Mrs. Bruner, thank you, because you've shared some things that a lot of us maybe haven't even thought of, especially Laura being in the classroom every day. It's going to be a very difficult challenge to make this work, and we've got to get people to do online until we have something that works even better. Kids are going to be too close. You know it because you see it every day. So thank you for standing your ground.
Mrs. Brunner, did you have any comments for this evening?
I just wanted to thank everyone and in advance for all the work that's going to be poured into trying to make the best out of this situation for our students. I want to also thank all the people who have been serving our community with food in the heat and providing meals for folks when it's 110 degrees outside and distributing those. And I just look forward to seeing all the amazing work that all the different staff members in the district are going to do, and the creativity and innovation that's going to happen. Again, just thank you to everyone in advance.
Thank you. Ms. Love, did you want to say anything?
I feel like I don't have anything else tonight because I feel like I did a lot of talking and now I'm like losing my voice. But, just thank you to the administration. It was a hard set of votes tonight, but, we survived. So that's all I have to say.
I just appreciate all of our really respectful conversations between each other. And I feel like we can work together well because we do respect each other's opinions and are respectful in our conversations with each other. And I truly appreciate that. It's very professional, and I'm very happy to see that we remain professional, even if we disagree on things. So thank you very much, because I am appreciative that we all do that. Thank you. Mrs. McGee, did you have anything?
Yes, I did, Madam President. I wanted to thank Dr. Castile for her many long hours I know that she's putting in, and all of our staff that have worked very hard putting these plans together. And I also wanted to thank the parents, the students, the staff who have sent to us emails with suggestions, their opinions, etc., and let them know that we do appreciate their input. We do take it all into consideration. And God willing, hopefully this will be a temporary situation, and this too shall pass. And thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I will go and I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you for sure at our next meeting on July 15th. Thank you. Have a good evening. And the meeting is adjourned.